Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Jeremy's IT Lab live stream. It's been a while. Glad to see you all here. First, before I get into it, just let me know if you can hear me, if I'm too quiet, too loud, or whatever. And let me know where you guys are watching from. We typically have a very international audience, so let's see where you guys are watching from. And already got a question on the NCORE course. Yes, so I am supposedly doing an NCORE course. That's what they tell me. But yeah, that is going slowly. I'm currently in the process of updating my CCNA course, which is also not progressing as I'd like, but I have plenty of excuses. You know, I'm always full of excuses. But yeah, maybe we'll talk about that more during the stream. All right, so we got people from Brazil, I see Brisbane, Australia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Canada, Cuba, Virginia, from Diddy Island. Take care of yourself. Watch out there. India, Cambodia. Okay. All right, so today we've got a CCNA AMA, Ask Me Anything. But it's not going to be just me. Let me bring on my two guests. 1 second. Okay, gentlemen, you should be online. Welcome. Welcome to
Hello.
Donald and Kelvin.
Hello.
If you guys have watched my streams before, you should know these two gentlemen. Donald, very experienced senior network engineer, or not network engineer, principal architect.
Thank you very much.
Architect. There you go. Also a CCNA instructor or book author, all sorts of stuff. Just want to introduce yourself, Donald?
Sure. I'm Donald Robb. I'm the lead architect over at Disney on the Hollywood side of things. I've written about 8 Cisco books and work occasionally with like INE and those kind of people. I get around.
Nice. Awesome. Keeping busy. And we also have Kelvin Tran. Kelvin, want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Sure. I'm Kelvin Tran. I work for CBT Nuggets as a trainer there. I've done some of their VMware, Microsoft, and coming up Cisco content there.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, Kelvin is... sorry, my display messing up. Kelvin is quite young, but very accomplished. Almost CCIE, CBT Nuggets instructor.
We'll see.
Almost is a strong word.
Almost. Well, we'll see. Next attempt, you'll get it.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to be taking questions from the chat. And also, I just like to talk about the CCNA version 1.1, which came out a couple months ago, get their opinions on it. And, just have some fun today. So, just to get started, I don't see any questions in the chat yet. Feel free to ask if you have any. So let me just bring up the CCNA version 1.1 changes and see what you guys think about it. So first, the spanning tree changes. They added root guard, loop guard, BPDU filter, and BPDU guard. What do you guys think about this change? Do you think that's a good idea, or is it too much? What do you think?
I'm ambivalent.
Yeah, the only one I kind of object to is loop guard. I kind of think that's not a CCNA topic, but I also...
Throwing you for a loop, Kelvin?
You know what? All I'm saying is I'm partial to UDLD, man. But yeah, BPDU filter, I mean, what's to say about it? Don't use it most of the time. BPDU guard and root guard are both pretty straightforward, so yeah.
I think they're pretty straightforward for standard operations. I mean, most of the guards are used in production, and filter I've seen used poorly in production. So it's probably worth addressing.
Yeah,
fair enough. I think most CCNA courses covered BPDU guard anyway. Like it's a natural thing to cover along with Portfast. So I think that makes sense, and I guess you might as well cover the others along with it. Yeah, so no strong feelings either way regarding that change.
I'm not like
I think that's
that.
a good change.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Another change, 2.8, went from describe AP and WLC management access to describe network device management access. And they also added cloud managed in there. You have
They
any
did.
particular feelings about that change?
Well, as you know, I've written CCNA books just like you, and we just finished
Yeah.
our update.
Yeah.
So I covered that rather extensively.
Yeah.
And basically, I interpret that as I'm basically saying mention Meraki. So basically, kind of went over those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes sense with the directionality of where Cisco's going, and some of the things they're doing upstream is like they're allowing you to convert between like Cisco images and Meraki images for APs and switches now, so or going to be. So it's becoming more of a thing. So I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll address the cloud managed point because I think the change from AP and WLC management to network device management is a bit of a nothing burger because I interpret that as just wrapping in routers, and SSH was already on there before, so that's a bit of a nothing burger change to me. The cloud managed change I like, with Meraki, as Don mentioned, with some of the other things that the other vendors are coming out with. So Juniper, you've got Mist, you've got Arista with Cloud Vision, and so you've got a lot of cloud management coming in. So I like that change.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, in my book, by the way, shill time, my books, Acing the CCNA Exam, Volume 1 and Volume
You
2
have to grab yours, Don.
are now available.
I was just looking to see if I had one around me.
Yeah, and Donald, as he mentioned, also, he helped Todd Lamley write the books for Cybex, Wiley. So I think,
yeah, so we just did our 1.1 updates. They should be up before the end of the year anyway.
yeah, nice. So those have traditionally been, like, along with the official cert guide from Wendell Odom, like those two have been the main choices. So let's see if my books can come in as an underdog. But
And I did write the
see.
new CCNA to make sure I'm not too crazy. So
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
that crazy.
Okay, good to see.
Well, not crazy is a bit of a strong word there.
All right. I guess we'll continue with this pattern. Before we go to the chat for questions, let's go on to the next change.
Sure.
6.4. In 1.0, it was compare traditional campus device management with Cisco DNA Center enabled device management. They removed that and then made it AI. So explain AI, generative and predictive, and machine learning in network operations. So you got any thoughts about that?
Oh, I got
boy,
50
do I.
pages of thoughts on that in my book.
All right. Feel free. Don, you wanna go first?
Go for it, Colin.
Oh,
Okay.
I was gonna say I love the fact that they included an AI topic. I hate the fact that they removed the DNAC topic to make room for it. It would have been perfectly fine in my view to just add the AI topic alongside DNA Center and just make it an 8-topic domain. I mean, it's not like your security domain. I'm looking at it right now. Your security domain is 10 topics, so it's not like it's unprecedented there. And in my view, you're taking a topic about something concrete, DNA Center, which don't get it wrong, DNA Center has not gone away. It's still out there, right? So knowing how to work with DNA Center, pretty valuable knowledge. And they took that out in place of a sky-high overview level AI topic. I'm not a fan.
See, but I don't think they really did. I mean, they don't call out DNA Center anymore, but you still have like the compare traditional network management with SDN controllers and those kind of things there. So, like in my book, I still chose to cover at least high level of DNAC or Cattle Center features.
Sure.
So it's kind of a gray area. I never really loved the inclusion of DNA Center just for the fact that it's kind of the elephant in the room. Like a lot of the stuff a CCNA person can learn by doing packet tracer and very basic stuff there. And then there's like, oh, by the way, here's this $100,000 server that you can't really run.
Waiting for DNAC on packet tracer.
Yeah,
that'd be something. But,
I mean, didn't they try that? Don't they have a network controller node that's kind of crap?
They did like there is
API
functionality that is. I mean, it exists. I mean, good for them for trying. but yeah, I'm not. I do like in the spirit of trying to abstract away from how like version specific Cisco exams used to be. They're trying to be more what's the word I'm looking for? General. Then I think it's fine. But there's always kind of the weird kind of scope creep of DNAC there, where it's like, oh, by the way, some people are saying that they're talking about like SDA configuration. I never really believed people when I was talking, but it's at least it should be more clear now.
Yeah.
And they can still make it hit you with it with their implied topics and stuff. So
yeah, I think I generally agree. Like, I didn't remove any coverage of DNAC in my book, and I'm not planning to in my CCNA course because it's pretty light coverage anyway, and I think it's a good topic to cover. And
I'm gonna say if you removed it there, you'd have an empty book.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. Actually, let me screen share here just so I can actually show people the topics.
That is an exception of yeah. I think it's reasonable. I mean, if you're going to talk about REST, you kind of need to authenticate pretty much 100% of the time in any kind of production environment. So, at the very least, you need to know how to use like a basic password, which is kind of where I took it. I might have talked about bearer tokens. I can't remember. No, I think I did basic passwords and bearer tokens afterwards. So I kind of covered both of those, but it's not out of the realm. It's like, how would you actually use this kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't even realize the 1.0 didn't cover auth types. I kind of assumed that the all the trainers went, well, yeah, obviously you meant to include auth types, so we're gonna cover it anyway.
I think I actually did in the first book. I just don't remember.
Nice. But I mean, yeah, it's a good change. You're like Don said, you're not using any production API without authentication.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's good to cover, especially because APIs tend to vary a lot. Let's just say it that way. Relatively respectfully, they tend to vary in terms of things like how you authenticate, how you return status codes. Do you return a proper status code, or do you use a 200 to represent an error? And so that kind of coverage of, hey, here's how you use APIs, REST APIs in general, so that you can transfer that to different kinds of APIs. I respect that.
Yeah, nothing much.
By the way, just to circle back, I realized we kind of glossed over the whole AI topic there in favor of ranting about DNAC.
Oh,
yeah. Feel free.
I think that is kind of an important thing to talk about. Yeah, it's one of those things there. Anytime you go to a conference like Cisco Live or any kind of thing there, like AI is a big feature there. So it's definitely something that's worth talking into there. So I kind of took from the approach of let's cover this and give it a nice baseline there compared to other offers, not Jeremy, but like another official study guide offer kind of covered in the paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, I'll respond to a criticism I've seen, and a criticism I may or may not have just levied against that topic, which is that it's a sky-high overview. It is in that sense, but also it's not like AI is completely non-applicable. It's not like this is a net plus kind of topic where you'll never get to use it. Plenty of especially some of the security solutions have been rolling out AI to detect threats, and so you see a lot of AI around, especially these days, and it's only going to get bigger. So from my perspective, I don't mind including it. I'm just kind of salty.
And there's no less than a dozen Skynet references in my chapter.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, when I wrote my CCNA book, or when I updated it for the new topics, I wasn't sure exactly what to expect from the CCNA exam. But yeah, when I checked out the official cert guide, like they barely covered it. So I definitely went in greater depth than Odom did, but
Well, I do like Odom. Like I am friendly with him, but I do feel like sometimes he kind of you can tell what topics he's interested in covering and which ones he aren't and isn't. And sometimes he kind of it's like, okay, that's done. Where's my paycheck kind of thing. And I think AI was kind of one of those.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll go on to the next change.
Oh, but that is not the final change, Jeremy. No, there's a stealth edit there that no one's really found. But if you look at the wireless LAN controller topic, it doesn't say which wireless LAN controller.
Oh, here we go.
And if you look at what's actually being sold by Cisco these days, it's not the traditional wireless LAN controller, it's the new 9800 controllers.
Yeah.
So I chose to cover that by covering both of them there, and Odem also covered both of them in a consolidated fashion.
Yep.
So it's not really being called out there, but I'll say when I did take the exam, I may have noticed something that's more indicating that I'm correct than more than not.
Yeah,
So
I think that makes sense, since given that's what they're selling, you know.
But yeah, and a lot of people are saying like, oh, by the way, the new wireless, we need to update all the wireless. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's fine. But yeah, I think a lot of people didn't quite realize that.
Fair.
Yeah, true.
I mean, we were at the point Dawn and I talked about, which I think was in July, where when these changes came out. I was kind of my take was, well, they didn't indicate the change, and WLC could easily mean either. So,
well, I mean, they kind of cheated by changing what WLC means.
Yeah, the old rug pull trick. But anyway, I'll just both. The Terraform change, holy freaking Luya! Thank God. Puppet and Chef support for Cisco is basically non-existent. I mean, the modules technically exist, but trying to use them is, well, let's just say good luck.
Yeah, I remember when I wrote the last book, when trying to cover Chef, the Cisco module was broken in the Chef of that version. So I think I ended up just saying like, okay, well, here's how you configure like Apache or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
and Puppet is, well, they've actually basically cheated and said we're basically Ansible now for that kind of stuff. They're not agent-based for network modules.
Yeah, it came down like a bolt.
Exactly right.
But Terraform, very, very applicable, especially when you're doing, because Terraform is an infrastructure provisioner, and so especially when you start getting into the world of cloud, you will see Terraform a lot. As far as the WLC change goes, the only thing I have to add to what Don said is that the 900 is important. The 900 is out there, but AirNet is also out there. And so it's worth knowing both from a practical standpoint, because you could easily run into either, especially if you're working with an older wireless deployment.
Yeah, and with the cloud management, I actually covered the Meraki wireless too. So I just
all
my base covered.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Yep, I definitely agree with that Ansible and Terraform change. Like, just in terms of market share, you know, especially regarding networks, like Terraform is definitely much more relevant than Puppet and Chef for people doing Cisco
At least
stuff.
for networking, like Terraform's being
it
used to be kind of useless for networking stuff, but nowadays they're like, you have Cisco iOS XE modules, you have Chamber modules, like it's you can use it to configure at least the basics of networking pretty well.
Yeah, I will say that Terraform becomes infinitely more useful when you go up, because of things like ACI. The Terraform ACI module is very good. I think the Terraform XE module is, let's just say, in its infancy in terms of functionality. I find Ansible to be a much more robust configuration solution.
And there's no civil war going on with Ansible right now. Whereas Terraform and OpenTofu is an interesting debate.
Haven't heard of that.
Basically, it's open source always likes to eat its own. So, like, basically, they decided HashiCorp didn't follow the open source licensing the way they should, so they kind of forked off and made their own. And
right.
It's a thing.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. You can point to a dozen open source solutions. It's usually what happens, and I'm sure this time next year there'll be a brand new spin on things.
Yeah. Okay, so overall evaluation of the CCNA version 1.1, what do you think? Thumbs up? Good changes?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that's included that I really rolled my eyes at. I just kind of, I think they're fair. I mean, I thought they were formally going to announce EIGRP. I did just kind of say to hell with it and included a EIGRP chapter in the book there, just because Cisco keeps going up to the line about EIGRP.
Yeah.
And even on the brand new exam, I'll say that they it's not quite as blatant as the previous versions, but they you may as well just include it.
It's worth touching on, even lightly.
It kind of feels like they want to, but then every time they get close,
yeah, it's like they're psyching themselves up for it there, and they're like,
Yeah.
no, the people who hate Cisco certifications will hate us if we do the thing
because they'll like you otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Well, we used to have to learn RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, and BGP to some extent for the CCNA.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, I have my gripe with the old BGP topic that Don knows about, but
yeah, that was definitely
that was definitely an interesting topic.
kind of topic, but
yeah.
All right, so I think that's it for the CCNA version 1.1. Let's go to some questions in the chat.
Let's go to 1.2.
Quite a few. 1.2, yeah. Predictions for 1.2. All right. So
rip out IPv4, add IPv10.
Yeah. Skip over IPv6.
Yeah.
Okay. First question. Someone says, is the CCNA exam the same as the Boson EXIM exam? So the answer to that is no. So Boson EXIM is a practice exam product. It's not what we call an exam dump or brain dump. The difference between those is brain dumps have real questions from the actual CCNA exam, and they are, according to Cisco's rules, they are cheating. And if you get caught using them, you will be banned, and they are not good. So, yeah, Boson EXIM is great. It closely simulates the kind of questions you can expect on the CCNA exam, covering the same topics, but they're not real CCNA exam questions because that would be illegal. You guys have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, that's about right. I'll say that Boson is, I mean, they try. I mean, they're just the same as like Kelvin and I making a practice test, just their company, right? So it's usually people will think about what the questions are there, and then they'll sometimes they hit the mark, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of how do I put this, recycling that goes on with Boson there. So if they paid good money for a question, they'll either lean more towards including it than not.
I want to milk it, yeah.
So some people get mad when you kind of go outside the lines of what's you need to learn for the CCNA, and Boson, they'll be like, well, people probably like learning about frame relay in a question or something like that. So, and it causes some frustration here and there, but they're generally trying to be more, value for the buck more than not. So that's kind of what
if you take Boson EXIM, like Dylan said, you will encounter some things that are sort of not within the CCNA exam topic strictly. You'll be like, I've never heard of this. I never studied this. But I wouldn't pay too much heed to those questions. But overall, I think EXIM is a great product. It's good to do practice exams.
I mean, the thing with Boson there, I've heard at least, this is just word of mouth because I haven't used Boson for the CCNA for the current one. I've heard that they've kind of drifted away a little bit from the traditional mantra, which was Boson is so close to the exam that it's almost like it's the real thing without actually being the real thing. I've heard that they've kind of drifted away. I don't know whether that's true or not. I will say that it's still by far the best practice exam that I've seen.
Oh yeah, they're definitely the best on the market.
Yeah.
That's undebatable.
Yeah.
The question is, like, some people will ask me, like, is it just as hard or harder than the exam, or if I pass Boson, can I pass the CCNA? And it honestly depends on when you write it. Sometimes Cisco will be harder, sometimes Boson will be harder. It's not like Cisco writes the exam and then they walk away and come back a few years later and say, okay, it was updated. They're always updating and tinkering with the question. Yeah,
always updating. And also each time you take the exam, it's a random draw from the pool.
Yeah, they'll have like whatever, no, let's just say 30 versions, and they'll randomly update those whenever they feel like it. So like it's sometimes they'll test on certain things. Like you'll find that if you take the exam right now, it might be a little bit later on the new topics, but as like say, I don't know, AI becomes more important, they might say that, okay, we're going to start testing a lot more heavy on that, or those kind of things.
Cool. All right, let's go to another question. Here we go. As someone with a year of experience as a network engineer, Should I focus on going for CCNA or skip it and go CCNP? What do you guys
Okay,
think of that? This is
I'll say this
common
pretty
question.
plainly because this comes up a lot. The amount of people I would recommend skip the CCNA is very, very few. Like, it basically be someone like who's like a juniper, like equivalent, like a CCNP kind of thing there, and just needs to learn Cisco for some reason, kind of thing. It's not.
Or someone who was a CCNA in the past.
Yeah,
like,
or they
continue to
expired and,
continue to work with networking and then like expire and wants to go for the NP. Honestly, there's someone in your Discord, Jeremy, who I honestly feel should just go for the straight for the NP, who is going for the NA first. So that kind of proves the point that most people should not be skipping the NA.
Yeah. Yep. I think
And I'm
that's
proud of
good
you for doing the
advice.
CCNA first, Kelvin.
Yeah, I agree. Generally, don't skip CCNA. Like, you have 1 year of experience as a network engineer, but there's a lot of fundamentals and general basics that you probably won't cover in your day-to-day job, but it's still worth taking the CCNA to actually learn it.
Yeah, I guess just to unpack it a little bit, there's basically two reasons. One is that the CCNP is not easy, and it's one of those things there where as you go higher and higher, fewer people get, right? So like if you put all your eggs on I'm definitely going to be a CCNP and then you fail, then well, now you basically have nothing on your resume for credentials. Whereas at least if you're a CCNA and maybe it's a little easy for you and fill some gaps, and then maybe that does something for you in your job search or your bonuses or whatever certification does for you, right? Yeah. So it's a good safety net, and it also fills in some gaps there. Like not a lot of jobs will color every single cert topic like the way that some of my old previous jobs used to do. So it's some people would work on, let's just say EIGRP, and the CCNA is OSPF only. So like they're at a disadvantage if they're trying to catch up.
Yeah. I mean, there's also I will say that in addition to the fact that the CCNP is not easy, it's made even less easy by the fact that the Encore is also the CCIE written, which just means that when you are getting your NP, you're also taking the IE written to get your NP. Although I will say that the Encore is so easy, given that it's the CCIE written, that it really more just increases the gap between the written and the lab, but that's beyond the point. Beyond
that's not
that,
your first exposure to. I mean, you don't want that to be
Yeah.
the first thing from Cisco you see, or
Yeah,
possibly
that's
the
fair.
first
Yeah.
information you see.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the other thing I will add to that is that if you feel very confidently that you could just jump into the CCNP, don't take the CCNA, but study for it. If you are very confident that you can pass the NP exam and you're not going to include the CCNA in your resume, okay, but at least read the books to see if there's any gaps you need to patch, and then go from there.
I'll add a caveat though. That's only if you have the proper experience to be a CCNP, like as in like a year of quality network experience, whatnot. There, if you're like a junior and you think like you're look smart and you get a CCNP without a CCNA, you're gonna really hurt yourself because people just see you as a paper cert and all that kind of stuff, right? So you really want to make sure you have the foundations one way or another. But yeah, if you have like the work experience, like you had a few network jobs and a CCNP would make sense, sure, that's not a huge deal.
Yeah, cool. All right, next question, pretty broad one. He says, I would like to know the next steps after getting the CCNA. So this is a very broad question. Any general advice, like for someone who has gotten the CCNA, what should they do next? What do you think?
Well, what I generally like to do, or say, is that you should generally first want to make sure you're as good, solid of a CCNA as you can be. So if you like barely passed, or like you feel like you bombed, like I don't know, IB version 6 or whatever, then you should go back and make sure that you're good there, because that's your foundation for your networking career, right? So you want to make sure that's as sturdy as possible. Otherwise, it's good to do things like build out your LinkedIn, start connecting with like recruiters and like that minded people, because a lot of don't forget the networking, as I like to say. And then you should also just communities like Discord are usually good there, because sometimes it presents opportunities, or at least helps you refine your craft a little bit there if you're trying to explain how ARP works to someone or like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the common thread there is don't jump straight to your CCNP for the reason that Don already mentioned. And also don't, so, I mean, beyond not jumping to the CCNP, don't jump to the I would say the trendy topics just because they're trendy. I'm specifically pointing at cloud because that's often the next step that people will try to take. They'll say, I have a CCNA, I know basic networking, let's jump to cloud. And then when they see blob storage, they'll run to the other side of the room, right? So there's I'll agree the optimal step beyond the CCNA is probably work experience. Just going for a job that uses your CCNA, I feel like kind of a hypocrite saying that. But that's the optimal step. But beyond that, just try not to go over your depth, so to speak. Don't go straight for cloud, for example. Build out something that build out a foundation that makes sense, and then go from there.
Yeah, I like to say don't work on cloud until you're actually like working with it in your job, because amongst other things, there like cloud's a lot, and you don't want to pick the wrong cloud. To be frank, I mean, it's you could say that Azure, so you should be able to figure out AWS there, but you're still like having to remember like 50 different services per cloud, that kind of stuff. It's anything that you put on your resume, you ultimately have to defend, right? So like if you if I look at your resume and see that you have Google Cloud there, I don't want to hear that, well, I studied that 2 years ago and I forgot everything about it, right? So
right. For sure. Okay, good stuff. Next question. Josh says, I got my CCNA with no prior IT experience. I briefly had a POS job, but the pay wasn't great compared to what I can make doing labor, and it wasn't network related. Any advice? Okay, so we got CCNA, got a low-level IT job, but it wasn't a great job. It was lower. I was
going to ask, was that a low-level IT job, or is that working on point of sale?
Point of sales, yeah.
Oh, point of sale. Okay, there we go. It's probably point of sale. I was thinking it was a piece of shit job.
I mean,
either way, you can go either way with that one.
There you go. All right, so any advice? Okay, so we got CCNA, sort of struggling finding a job with decent pay. What do you think?
It's probably repeat away what I kind of said earlier. Just make sure you're as solid as possible. Start building your networking community, interacting with people. Beyond that, you can probably do things like I don't know if job fairs are popular anymore, but like job fairs, go to IT communities. A lot of vendors will do things in big cities every now and then for meetup groups. Just better try and build people or meet people, because a lot of times people get in because like they're a friend with a guy or that kind of thing, and you get an opportunity more than like your nameless resume in a pool of thousands.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is that salary is very job market dependent, is very location dependent. And so it's one of those things where it sucks to have to move, especially if you're already rooted down with a family, but it's something that we'd be remiss not to mention. Is try looking at other locations if you do have the flexibility to relocate, and see what the salary looks like there in comparison to cost of living. But beyond that, sometimes it's just, especially, and this is especially true for people who are already established in another industry, who want to move to IT, they'll have to take a pay cut to do it, unfortunately. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast, because you may be established in that industry, but you're not established here.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but sometimes you just have to swallow the bullet, and just you will eventually get salary increases.
Yeah. IT has, great salary potential, but at first you might have to take a short-term pay cut, just sort of get into the industry and then build your career from there. So,
sure.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Is it possible to complete the CCNA in 3 months?
I mean, 5 is usually about the average.
Yeah.
It's possible to do it shorter. Sure. Depends on the person and, a lot of variables, but sure.
Yeah. So it's very variable. Like, depends on any prior experience you have, how much time you have to study each day, just generally how good you are.
Sometimes you just get a topic. Like, some people have no trouble at all with subnetting, and some people take months to learn it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it really varies. I'd say the average is like, yeah, you said 5 months. I think that's probably about
That's
right. 4 to
usually what I
6.
say. It's usually about 5 or 6 months
Yeah.
per physical exam, usually, or and that kind of carries across the board for other vendors, depending on what you're talking about.
Yeah, 3 months is pretty
I'd
quick.
say don't worry too much about the time unless you have some time crunch, like an employer.
Yeah, like your boss says,
breathing- yeah,
like right by the
breathing
end
on
of
your
the
back.
year, or you're fired, or you lose a
Yeah.
bonus or something. That's one conversation,
And if you're just doing it to do it, and it's on your own leisure, just don't worry about the time. Just make sure it's much more important that you master material than anything else. I don't care if you do a CCNA in a month or a year. That it's worth the same at the end of the day as long as you understand the material.
Yeah, for sure.
and it's actually more important to understand the material because if you do an interview, you still have to pass the interview, even if you have the credential, right? So, in fact, getting credentials can make the interview harder because they expect more from you.
Yeah. Like I got my CCNA in 2 months. I studied like crazy, but to be honest, I was not a solid CCNA when I got my CCNA. Like, I'm good at studying for a test and passing the test, but there was still a lot I did not understand in great detail.
But did you read your CCNA book to study for it?
No, if I had read my book, then I would have understood it all perfectly. But
you still managed to get
Second
the you still managed to get the highest CCNA score of all of us who that took the new CCNA when it came out, eh? Back when it was 203.01.
Oh yeah, I
like
got I forget what it was, pretty high. But
Yeah,
I actually
I
studied
don't
a
think I'll
bit.
tell you anymore. I thought I got like 900 or something. I don't know. What did you get, Jeremy?
I don't remember.
On spot.
I think he got a 970. I read that
Something like
number.
that, yeah.
970. That's like I don't know about that.
I actually studied. I did boson exim and all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever it was, but yeah, they don't tell you the scores anymore, so it's
Yeah.
estimating.
Yeah, it's all percentages now, based on the different topics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So, next question. We got another question about skipping the CCNA and going for CCNP. So, go a little back in the stream to see that. Okay, so we have someone who is 47 years old in Italy, says he got his CCNA in June, but he can't find a job because he doesn't have enough experience and they're looking for young people. What do you recommend for someone trying to get into IT at 47?
I mean, I'll preface that Kelvin and I have a Western-centric view of the world for job market stuff, at least.
And also not what we haven't had the experience of, let's say, let's call it age discrimination.
I mean, I've hired a lot of older people, so I guess I've kind of counterbalanced that. It's hard to say with something like that, but like it's possible that you may have to relocate, like Calvin said, or possibly. I know Europe is very much into credentialism there, so like the West doesn't really care about degrees, but sometimes Europe does. So it's you might have to do that there, or perhaps do like internships or something to do. It's hard for me to answer, to be honest.
Yeah, it's especially because markets are so varied. It's hard to give anything beyond just general advice and empathy. Which sucks, but
it can be very country specific. That's for sure. Like I know Japan is a totally different market than like Canada or the US, and I'm sure Italy is as well. So it's hard to give concrete advice, but
I will say props to everyone who is making a job switch or who is just getting their CCNA. It's honestly amazing.
Yeah, for sure. It's not easy to change, careers. At 47, I'm sure you've been in whatever career you're in now. You've been in that for a while, I'm sure. So, yeah. It's a big change. Okay, we got next one. This one's more of a comment. Since we were talking about BPDU filter, he said, just an hour before we had a loop in our ISP network because of the BPDU filter command. So there you go. Watch out, BPDU filter. Very dangerous feature.
I mean, it has a use, and its use is, I think I answered this in the CCNA Discord there, so I might as well address it here. Its use is segmenting off STP domains. So if you're an SP, for example, that's customer facing, and you have a customer facing port that you don't want, for example, PPU coming in to take root guard will shut down the port. BPU guard will shut down the port. And so it's not something that you want to happen there.
Can shut down the port.
It can.
Right.
So from that perspective, filter is there to essentially segment off the STP domain, but you have to be very careful because essentially once you turn on BPDU filter, you have turned off STP on that port essentially, and so it's up to you now to handle loop prevention. That's why it can be so dangerous.
Yeah, I worked with a consultant once who confused BPDU guard with BPDU filter, or other way around. But anyway, he put BPDU filter on all the ports on the switch.
All the ports, okay.
And on the core and all the everywhere. And some guy was doing a presentation in the boardroom and plugged in like a laptop and it created a loopers or whatever and took down the entire corporation. So, oops.
Yeah, great war stories. Yeah, so BPD filter, yeah, definitely watch out there. All right, we got another question. How is the future of the network industry? Is CCNA still the industry standard to get a job? I hear people are starting to move to cloud or focusing on cybersecurity. So this is a very common concern.
Yeah, so that's probably one.
Networking doomed. AI's gonna take all our jobs.
Yeah, I rant about this. I did another podcast that a while ago there, and I rant about it, but you never aired it, so I'll repeat it. So basically, a lot of the IT people are very doom and gloom and like waiting for the shoe to drop. So like, I started the industry around when I think 2000 Windows 2003 was out there, and that was like the end of the MCSE system engineer because it was so
boomer
in 2000. Yep. And I've heard it all, and like it's like core functionalities aren't going to change there. Perhaps like products evolve and CLIs and those kind of things will change over time, but like the core principles are still there. CCNA is still the best de facto cert out there. It's the most widely known. It covers the most ground. There might be some cases where perhaps a Juniper cert or something's better there, but it's much more niche and harder to not as much bang for your buck. And things like cloud, like people will say like I'm going to go in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity does not want juniors. Like I know like it got propped up by like the network chucks and those kind of people there who make content from it, but cybersecurity wants people who worked in like several different IT domains, and then eventually went to cybersecurity. They don't want someone who just started the IT and is now in cybersecurity. That's you might get a job like reading logs or doing basic things like
in the stock, for example.
Yeah, or yelling at users for clicking on the phishing email and attempt or those kind of things. But it's not the kind of field you can work towards cloud. Sure, you can work towards her, and sometimes some people will absolutely like jump the queue and get a cloud job right out of the gate. Like it happens, but people win the lottery. It's just a thing. So CCNA, long story short, is a nice, reliable cert that most junior jobs will respect.
Yeah, the CCNA there. I mean, the thing about the other vendors that Don mentioned is that they have associate level certs. Because JNCIA is an associate level cert. The only thing is it expects you to know networking already. I mean, there is a network fundamentals domain that covers subnetting, that covers some basic routing, but beyond that, you dive into the deep end of things like routing policies. And if you don't know anything about networking and you are jumping straight into it, it's like, what the heck is a routing policy? And so the other associate level certs are generally just, I say generally, there are some that are better than others as far as covering vendor agnostic fundamentals goes. But the JNCIA especially is just a do you know Geno's kind of cert. Which means
kind of assume you have the CCNA already.
Yeah, the CCNA is like the standard. Yeah. So they assume like, okay, you already have the CCNA. That's the industry standard. So we'll build on top of that.
And the people riff on the CCNA all the time for being Cisco specific. I haven't seen.
It's really not. I mean, the iOS stuff, obviously, like it's 90% theory.
I mean, it's not like they're going to give. It's not like they're going to give you a Geno's question. Like if it's a CLI question, it's going to be iOS. But the concepts are very applicable. But as far as the what was the other part of that? As far as cloud and cybersecurity, as far as security goes, it's what I say is you need to, what a lot of people say is that you need to understand what you're securing before you secure it. And so if it's something where you've never deployed a web server before, well, how are you going to secure the web server against web attacks? You need to understand the infrastructure that you're securing. As far as cloud goes, I kind of skipped over this point when I made my blob storage joke. The reason cloud isn't junior friendly compared to some of your other more fundamental domains is because if you're going into cloud, you're just taking what was previously on premises, your storage, network, compute, and some other services. You're taking all of that and moving it to someone else's servers. At the end of the day, that storage, that network, that compute still exists, and you need to understand it.
Wait. You made a joke?
Don, with your standard for comedy, I wouldn't expect you to pick it up.
Okay, yeah. Good answers, I think. Yeah, cloud and security, just to repeat what they said, are sort of things you build towards in your career. Like, you need a solid foundation in networking, Linux, operating systems, things like that to really make a good career in those areas. So,
also, let's kind of slip this in as well, is that like the job postings will always ask for more than what they actually need. Like they might say things like, oh, by the way, we'll take a CCNA or a CCNP or, MPOS or whatever scary terms are out there. And they're usually trying to be more inclusionary more than not there. And they're trying to, A, give you a view of like everything you might see on the job, and B, just trying to cast a wider net, even though it sometimes doesn't look that way. And so like sometimes they'll say like, oh, we only want people for 5 years, but it's kind of like you apply anyway. Like it's the job, it's the company's job to say you're not worth a job interview. It's not your job to say you're not worth it. So like apply. There's things like minimal standards. Sometimes there's other conversations like maybe I'm looking for a junior, but I'm only putting out the intermediate job posting right now. Like there's all kinds of considerations. So even though a job posting looks like, they want me to learn Ansible and all this Python and all this other scary stuff, but usually the actual job is like I'm plugging in computers and doing imaging or something like that. Like it's, but the actual job posting looks like, okay, this is kind of scary. But
yep, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, there's no harm in just applying. Like you could get rejected, but there's no harm in applying for a
Don't burn
job.
bridges.
Yeah,
I like to joke
exactly.
it's like online dating there. Just keep sending or sending hey until you get smiley face back.
Yep, that works too. Okay, next question.
Somehow for him it did.
Got a question about books. Says your books are your books a good source of learning to pass the exam? Do you cover all the points? I might be biased,
all our
but
books are terrible.
No, they're terrible. Don't buy them. I might be biased, but yes, I think they are a great resource. I have them both here. Volume 1 and 2, Acing the CCNA exam. Check them out. And also, Donald, you want to shill your books again?
Yeah, they're not published yet, at least the new versions, but check out Tal Lamley and I's books.
Yep.
Coming soon to a theater near you.
Cool.
I mean, I know who's winning this show off. One of you out the books.
Yep.
All right. Next question. What is a vendor-neutral cert you guys would recommend to get into cybersecurity? So this sort of touches on the cybersecurity thing we just talked about, but are there any good certs for that?
Generally speaking, I hate vendor neutral. It's usually the worst kind of certification you can get because vendor neutral sounds nice there, but what it usually means is you kind of know what a term is, but you don't know what to do with it. Now, saying that, cybersecurity, again, it's not a junior cert and not something you should be going towards, but like Cisco, for example, has the CCST cybersecurity, which I'm just finishing up that book. And then they have the cyber ops security and eventually the professional. So you can stick with the Cisco train and get, on the whole, is probably a better package than like what CompTIA gives you. Yeah, I'd say CompTIA would probably be the secondary answer, but Calvin and I have our gripes with that.
Yeah, I will say that my gripe with CompTIA is primarily focused around the Net Plus, to some degree the Security Plus, but I also feel that the Security Plus being what it is, intro cybersecurity is generally more
I find
theory
C++
based anyway.
is inoffensive. Like I'm not mad.
Yeah.
at it.
Besides some of the more offensive topics that they include, like implementing
Storage.
SAN.
Like,
Yeah. But some of the other things, CIA, for example, some of the other more fundamental concepts, I don't object to. In fact, like right now, I'm looking at the CCST cybersecurity. I was just going to ask you how it is because I haven't looked at this exam yet. The Security Plus kind of looks better, I will say. Just because the common theme with the CCST for me has been CompTIA maybe too fat on topics, but the CCSTs are too lean.
yeah,
in
I
the current
mean,
form.
so I've written 2 of the 3 books.
There's 3?
Yeah, they just released a desktop support one.
Oh, that's right.
It's
did
like
they?
their A+
Cisco?
version. Yeah, I meant to do it, but I was too busy with the other stuff.
They're trying to go a full CompTIA.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
better,
declaring war against CompTIA for their stuff. But yeah, I'd agree that the CCST is perhaps a little bit leaner. I guess it depends on what you're if you're trying to do a search to learn topics, that's one thing versus if you want a very lean exam that's not going to cover things like storage topics or random buzzwords, then CCST is inoffensive. Saying that, almost everyone can skip a CCST and just go straight to CCNA or cybersecurity or cyber ops.
Cool.
If you wanted to go with the Cisco train, if you want to do CompTIA, that's fine. I mean, I just did their beta test for their cloud networking expert, and that I have a lot of gripes. But
expert is a bit of a strong word.
yeah, their Secure X one is basically just renaming their CASP one or whatever it's called. So,
Yeah, CASP.
Yeah, it's or CASP, not CASP. But it's fine. I mean, but you're probably not going to write a security cert and get a cybersecurity job on its own. Like you're probably going to do that as we're working towards other things.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. A question that I think is for me, but I can also ask to you guys. Are you still studying for CCIE? So first, I'll answer that. Kind of slowly. Like I'm currently doing a Python course, really working on getting my programming up, coding, things like that. But yeah, taking it very slowly.
Is that Kirk's course?
What's that?
Is that Kirk's course?
Yes.
Yeah,
working
I
on
forget
that.
what it's called. Python for network engineers.
PyNet.
Oh yeah, I'm actually doing the new one now. They're just I periodically do Kirk's course every now and
Nice.
then.
Yeah, it's a good refresher.
Yeah.
Great course. Check it out.
I didn't know you had a new one.
Yeah.
And I'll show that I did do the DevNet Associate Series for INE, so it's 7 courses of fun if you want automation.
Yep. Cool. And how about you guys? Are you taking on the CCIE? Like, Kelvin, when's your next attempt?
Whenever I get the time to. I came really close in the last attempt, and I'm convinced I would have passed, but I bungled a config rule because I accidentally took a command out, and one of the config rules is you can't take a command out. It was working afterwards, but I took a command out, so I bite the bullet, and that's 60% off one domain.
I wouldn't call it 2% close, but good job.
You know what? Hey, closer than you.
Oh.
No, but yeah, it's on the docket. I've been working on it slowly.
Yeah, I'm probably doing a DevNet expert attempt in, I think I'm March or so in
Nice.
Texas. I think I've cleared my runway enough that I can do that.
Yeah, go away. We don't want you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my CCIE will definitely be sometime in the future. I will get to it eventually, slowly working on it, but we'll see. Okay, next question. Jeremy, I see that you added 4 more videos on the CCNA course. Is this the update that you promised you will do, or are there more videos coming? There are more coming. In fact, today after this call, I'm going to get back to working on my AI video. But yeah, expect more coming soon.
And maybe it'll come out in the next century.
Yeah, maybe, in time for the next CCNA update, maybe I'll be done. No, it should only take another couple weeks or so. Okay, next question. Are certifications like CCNA the only way to get into networking jobs? Or are there other ways like projects which may help? What do you think?
Technically speaking, you can just luck out and get a job and have no certifications at all. Those people do exist. They usually work through like help desk or tech support and kind of fall into a job. So, I mean, it can happen. It's just CCNA is most reliable for getting an entry level job there because it's recognized across the board. And networking roles are usually happy with a CCNA, and like a Juniper shop will usually take like a Cisco person, but the opposite's not always true.
Certs give you a leg up, but they're especially if you, like Don said, if you already have the network, if you have like networking experience, if you already have the human side of networking, if you have connections, it is not the only path. And as long as you can do a good job.
Yep. Yeah, I think I generally agree. I know in Japan, at least, it's actually quite easy. Like as a new graduate, most big companies have like new graduate recruiting every year, and you can easily get in without a cert like that. But for someone who's already like an adult, in another career, I'm not sure about how that works. But
yeah, there's a lot of mills like your AT&Ts and your IBMs or ISPs, and they'll usually work with colleges and basically work out internships there where they get basically cheaper labor
and moldable labor.
Yeah, exactly. They get to train them from zero, from nothing.
Yeah, so that's pretty common. So that's but anyway, long story short, you can. It's just you're really trying to stack the deck in your favor, right? Because a job posting from like the hiring end is like if I put out a job for Disney, there's going to be about 1,000 applicants usually, and then it's okay. Well, there's a pile, and if it's like I'm hiring, I don't really hire for entry level people anymore. But like if I was hiring for an entry person, I'm not like reading the resume out like close. I'm looking for like, do you have a CCNA or not? Because there's not really a lot of interesting things in the entry level job. If it's a senior, then that's more I'm doing more headhunting, and I'm getting more involved in tracking down someone. But yeah, long story short, it happens, but it's better to be prepared than not.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely good to have, just like Donald said, just to get them to look at your resume. If you have 1,000 resumes, you got to filter through them somehow to,
yeah, because how it works is there's something called an ATS, and essentially it's a system that will rank resumes by keyword matches, which is things like Cisco or CCNA or whatever words you put in. And usually, if I'm looking for, let's just say, a junior person, I'll look for like 3 or 4 interviews. I'm not going to interview 50 people for an entry level job, usually speaking. So basically, we pick like essentially the top 3 names, unless there's something going on that encourages you to look at other people.
Yep. Okay, cool. I got a $10 tip from Jonathan Makura. He retracted his message, so I can't see what you said, but thank you. Thanks for the tip. Let's find another question. I saw one a second ago. Oh, here we go. Do you think you do more actual configuring as a network engineer, or do you do more research, diagnostics, and troubleshooting? So what does a network engineer spend most of their time actually doing?
It depends on if they're a true network engineer or not. Because that's one of those nebulous job titles that can mean anything from I'm a help desk with a fancy title to I'm an actual engineer. You'll find that it really depends if the shop has an architect team or not. So if the team has an architect or the company has an architect group, then usually that means that the engineer is doing more of the configuration. If they do not have an architect group, then usually the engineers act as the architects and they do the design. That's usually how it breaks down.
I'll interpret the question a little bit differently, in the sense that it also depends on whether you're in-house IT or whether you're something like a consultancy. If you're doing something
that's different.
Yeah, if you're doing something like a consultancy where you're jumping from project to project, the way I interpret the question is: are you doing more maintenance? Or are you doing more greenfield deployment and just getting into actual going from project to project? And that's going to depend on whether you're in-house or you're
that's fair.
Consultancy. Yeah,
like I was a consultant for a good 10 years before I started doing the architect thing, and I mean, I would basically like have a dozen projects per quarter kind of thing that I'd be working on, and so it just it depends on what kind of job you're doing and what industry and those kind of things there.
Yeah, cool. All right, I got a question about my sweatshirt. with the Jeremy's IT Lab logo. I don't have anything for sale at the moment, but I did get some requests, so I'm sort of testing out some different products. So, just
He will
wearing this
literally
one.
sew you the shirt off his back.
Literally. Yeah, so probably sometime in the future, put them up for sale, but I'm just testing some different products, making sure they're good, so we'll see. All right, next question. I believe Jeremy grew up in Canada. Is the CCNA in demand mainly in the Ontario region? Well, Donald, you're in Canada. Is CCNA in demand here?
Yep. I'd say CCNA is relatively global. I say relatively just because I'd imagine places like China would probably prefer Huawei and whatnot, but it's probably recognized even there. So it's a safe bet.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's pretty global. So basically, wherever you are, if you want to get into networking, I think that's the best first step.
And usually jobs that have nothing to do with networking, will usually accept CCNA because usually entry-level jobs are happy to see that you have any kind of certification. So
right.
If you have that, it's not like you're excluding yourself from a tech support job or a help desk or anything like that.
Yeah.
And also, they know you won't be the kind of sysadmin just blaming the network.
Yeah. I mean, you might do it, but you do it with authority.
Yeah. Okay, another question. How do we know when we are fully prepared without having boson? So can you know if you're ready for an exam without taking practice exams or something like that?
Yeah.
Any advice?
I'd say you can. Boson definitely makes it easier, right? It makes it easier to identify weak spots that you might not even know about. But as a rule, I'd say if you can go to an exam topics blueprint, and I mean, I'm looking at the CCNA right now, for example, if you can describe physical infrastructure connections of WLAN components, if you can look at that objective and all of the others and say, yeah, I can do that very confidently and not have any kind of hesitation about that, I'd say you're ready. Of course, obviously, again, practice exams help with that process, but at the end of the day, just go back to the blueprint as your Bible.
Yeah, it really comes down to your, I don't know a better way of putting it, but your maturity in terms of honestly assessing yourself. So if kind of what Kelvin was saying there, if you look at all the exam topics and you also rate yourself 1 to 5, 1 being I hope I never see this on the exam, and 5 being I hope the exam is 100% this question, then if you find yourself not rating yourself 5 on anything there, and you want to make sure you're covered, because if you don't study for an exam topic, you're always taking a gamble that the exam gods are going to take pity on you and not hit you on it, right?
Yeah, right. One piece of advice I'd have is to join a community like my Discord server, for example, and try helping people out. If someone has a question about how ARP works or something, are you able to explain it to them? Do you actually understand the topic? So try helping others out. And if you explain something incorrectly, then that means you don't understand it. And probably one of us will point it out to you, say no, this isn't actually quite right. So I think that's another way.
Communities in general are very good for, because if you're self-studying, generally what can happen is you turn into your own echo chamber, essentially, where you don't, again, like I said, you don't know where your weaknesses are. Communities are very good both in terms of answering questions and revealing potentially some of those weak spots that you can patch up on, or asking questions yourself and maybe getting a perspective from someone that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. That can help you. Even if you think you understand something, getting that different perspective, someone else's way of understanding it, might help you too. So
yeah, for sure.
I think at the day, it's like Don said, there's the human side of networking as well.
Yep, definitely. And we can usually tell from people on Discord, if they're about to take the CCNA exam, you can tell if you've seen them interacting on the server, okay, this person's going to pass, this person's probably not going to pass. You can tell by how they explain things on the server. So yeah, just come on the server, talk with people, ask questions, help others, and I think it'll be very beneficial.
You mind if I throw in a question I saw in chat here?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because I want to talk about this. What do the guests think of Netacad courses?
I thought you were talking about the comment. You're talking
comment.
about a beard.
Yeah, I saw that one too. SDKO. Yeah, thanks for that one, bud.
Yeah, Netacad is bless their hearts for trying.
Yeah, Netacad can be great. It can be great with a good instructor. It is very instructor dependent.
And also a good student. Both of them need to be trying hard.
Yeah, because the material is well, let's say it leaves things to be desired on its own. I don't know if this has changed. Well, I mean, it hasn't. But I say that because I haven't seen the NetAcad content in a few years. But I used to be in pretty close contact with a guy who taught the NetAcad courses for the CCNA and the CCNP. I had access to that content. I was not a fan of it on its own. There was a lot of the instructor, piping in and saying and expanding on it.
Like
but
the bread and water version of.
Yeah,
like
it's a good shell.
It. Like you'll be nourished to get to a point, but like you're not gonna really be satisfied unless like the teacher and you have the labs and stuff. Like it's you got to remember NetAcad is meant for people in college who aren't necessarily going to be taking the CCNA, and they could very well be a software student or a software developer student that just wants to. They have to do it because it's like the first term and they're made to, and they're never going to think about it again. So it can't be like okay, we're making sure your exam ready.
That and the NetAcad courses along those lines, because they assume an academic institution is involved, they also assume an instructor is involved. So whereas most of the people watching Jeremy's channel, I imagine, would be self-studiers. Maybe some in college, but most of them are going to be self-studiers. NetAcad isn't great for that. Whereas a course that's designed for self-studiers, like Jeremy's course or CBT Nuggets' course or INE's course, those courses are going to be more comprehensive than a NetAcad course in that sense.
Yeah, I generally agree with what you guys said. Like, I haven't taken a NetAcad course, but I have seen the materials. And yeah, if you want to get your CCNA and you don't have an instructor, definitely go with my course or Neil Anderson or David Bumble or someone like that over NetAcad, I'd say, if your goal is to pass the CCNA.
Yeah, like unless you're literally going to college, like you've made that decision, you shouldn't be doing NetAcad in any form.
Yeah.
And you can't even get NetAcad if you're not part of a school anyway. So
I thought you could pay like $700 for it. I thought someone told me.
Can you?
Yeah.
Anyway, if you can, don't do that.
Yeah, I think they do sell it.
I thought that was the Cisco U stuff.
Yeah, that might be legacy, but before Cisco U, there was a tier between like the Cisco Learning, and I thought you could buy NetAcad. Or at least people told me that you could.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure if that $700 one is the same as the NetAcad stuff, but yeah, they did have that.
It sounds like Cisco U, because $700 is a pretty penny.
Yeah, possible. I mean, Cisco uses its own thing, but even now, Cisco U, it's more meant for people who are work buddies for it. So it's
it's not cheap.
Yeah, I would not pay $700 for a CCNA course. You can find some much cheaper than that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, another common question here. I'm trying to get my CCNA, but is it essential to get CompTIA as well? I'm not sure if he means like A+ or Network Plus, but what do you think? Someone
there's CCNA, and they also want
they're wondering, should I get a CompTIA cert as well, like A+ or
if
Network
they
Plus?
insist on that, I would say do the Sec Plus if you're thinking compliance reasons, or perhaps like one of the more niche ones if they like if you feel like the Project Plus is necessary. But I would do like A+ if you're a CCNA. That would make sense.
Yeah, I mean the only exception I can think of is if your employer is paying for it, and at that point it's free, just do it. But
yeah, I mean if work tells you that's one thing.
Yeah,
or, if they say like, look, you get the job or you get a bonus or promotion if you do it, then fine. But
I can't think. Yeah, I'm trying to, but I can't think of a scenario right now where someone would have the CCNA and then need a Net Plus, for example, for anything.
The only way that can happen is like if the boss is like,
if it's work mandated.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty sure even CompTIA wouldn't force someone to get a Net Plus.
But yeah, keep in mind, by the way, our objection there is more money based than anything else. Like the Net Plus is not going to hurt you having it, besides the fact that it burns a hole in your wallet.
Yeah, I would say that if you have a bunch of CompTIA there, I would probably start raising an eyebrow, and a lot of other people who don't like CompTIA would too, because there's kind of a grace period where like it's like, okay, you got scammed by CompTIA, it's fine. But if you're like, I have 8 CompTIA, so it's like, okay, he drank the Kool-Aid. I'm not really sure about that person, but
the triad tends to be non-offensive.
Yeah.
I will say one thing about the A+. Like when I decided at first I wanted to get into IT, IT is a very broad field, so I started studying the A+, and it sort of gave me like a sort of general light overview of various different fields of IT, and I thought networking was interesting. So then I went for the CCNA. I didn't actually take the A+ exam, but it was nice to get a sort of overview.
Yeah, I mean,
of the
there's
field.
fun reading the books, like especially if you have like a CBT Nuggets or those kind of things there, where like it's easy to check out the content, or like a O'Reilly subscription. Like that's fine. And if you want to take the thing there, my biggest issue with the A+ is that it's 2 exams. I always thought that was extortionary.
Yeah, Jeremy, you didn't let CompTIA take what is it, $440 of your money or something like that for the A+?
No, I did not. Although I did let them scam me into buying IT fundamentals study materials.
Oh, good lord!
So yes, I technically before the A+, I started with IT fundamentals, and that.
Though to be fair, when I did my CCNA in 2005, I think it was, I did my Net Plus and A+ after.
Okay. I have my own story there too. I did Net Plus, Sec Plus, and then I don't know if you
Sec Plus did that too.
Hey, you got those for life. I only have those until 2025. I'm good after 2025. You're stuck with it for life. But my story there is I got the Net Plus, Sec Plus, and I don't know if either of you know this, but CompTIA has these things called stackable certs.
I do, because my for life search is still usable in Stack, so I keep getting.
I got the A+ just to satisfy a stackable cert, because they won't give you the stackable cert if you don't have the A+ there. So that's my CompTIA got my money story.
The stackable cert is like you get a cert for having these certs.
It's the badge that they give you. It's like the 2x VCP badges that they give you for taking the VCPs. Yeah.
Cool. All right, we got another question. I'd say this is about like study strategy. So he's asking, I started reading your CCNA books, but when should I watch your CCNA videos? So you guys have a lot of experience studying for cert exams. Like, how do you use multiple materials, like a book and a video, or how do you do that?
So, go for it.
I was going to say, I tend to think of the exam as topics. So instead of looking at this from a perspective of, well, hey, I'm reading through a book, I look at it from a perspective, I'm learning OSPF, for example. And then along the way, right, let's say I read through a chapter on OSPF and I don't feel too confident on it, then I'll incorporate a video course on OSPF, or I'll incorporate some documentation on OSPF. Documentation tends to be a little less important in CCNA just because it's so fundamental. Most of the courses do a pretty good job already, but especially when you get higher up, start thinking in terms of technologies and features and topics rather than looking at the cert as one big thing.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that personally, I do like reading things first if it's a new topic. I have a hard time reading if it's a topic I know already. What I generally like to do is I do like passive learning, which is kind of what I call put on like a video course like such as yours, and like do something else and just kind of get through the first run through there. So play something like a low effort video game, like don't do like Call of Duty multiplayer, do something there where you can kind of
Stardew Valley, make a farm.
Yeah, like something where not plot heavy, not like Twitch folk, like just something there so you can get through the whole material. And what that kind of does is it kind of helps unpack some of the chicken and the egg situations that you get when you first learn topic. And then after that, then I can go into like the deep dive of reading or going back and watching the courses more focused and that kind of thing. So I generally like passive learning where it makes sense to. And,
the other thing I like to do is have a lab up alongside the course. That just makes it easier to follow along if there's a demo.
That's always a good idea too. So like if I'm doing passive learning and whatnot, and I see something there, I'll usually stop the game or whatever I'm doing, and then just kind of lab it out for a while. So
it makes it feel much more natural rather than forced, in the sense that I'm doing a book and then now I'm doing a video. It makes it feel a lot more organic.
No, sometimes I like watching the stuff a little bit beforehand. Sometimes there's those people that are like, oh, that lab that we worked on the past few pages, that's designed not to work there. And then, you find out after like hours of troubleshooting, like, oh, I should just read it.
Should just watch.
Yep, good advice. I'd say the way I do it these days is, like Kelvin said, sort of think of it more as topics. So if you have a book and a video course, study one topic in the book and then watch it in the video course and study it that way, labbing, while you're doing it. But there are different ways to study. Everyone's got their own methods, but you could go all the way through the book and then go all the way through the video course as like a second pass through the material, or you could do the
there's
opposite.
different ways of doing the same kind of thing there. Reading the book and then doing the video course is essentially the same thing as doing passive learning.
I'll go ahead and tie it up with one final comment, which is don't. To an extent, don't look at someone like me or Don or Jeremy and say, well, they have a lot of starts, they must know how to learn. I mean, yeah, we do. We know how we learn. But ultimately, you can't expect to just take our methods and plop them in and expect them to work for you, right? So, like, I'll give you an example. I don't think Don takes notes, and neither do I. It's one of those things where we've built enough of a foundation, and that's why building a foundation is so important, because once you build a good enough foundation and you get high enough up, eventually you're not really learning a new topic. You're learning extensions to topics you already know. But, we don't take notes. That's not something I recommend for everyone, especially if you're just starting out. When I was starting out, I took notes, right? But so just because someone's not doing something or someone is doing something doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Ultimately, it's going to take some experimentation on your part to figure out what.
You got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
You might even find that you balance between different methods depending on topics there. I mean, there's some things that I learned that are like torture to learn, like say ITL and those kind of things there where it's like, oh my god, if there's another option, I take that. But those kind of things there, like sometimes you gotta mix it up there just to get through it, and other times you're really interested and it just depends what you're doing there. Like what I do as an architect is a lot of research and learning and basically trying to figure this kind of stuff out there. So like it's I'm really good at internalizing it, so that's why I don't usually take notes unless there's I might take like the odd here's this useful thing here and there, but for the most part I don't put a lot of effort into that unless it's like I literally need to make a design document or something.
You say you do research, Don. I don't think Googling what's an IP address counts as research.
It helps.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that, taking notes also. Like, I've always felt pressure, like studying equals taking notes. You have to take notes or you're not studying. But it just never really worked for me. So, like, hearing other people say, like, I just don't take notes. Like, hearing you guys say that, it's sort of like comforting, like, oh, it's okay to not take notes. Like, there are other ways to study. And you can
I literally write books. I don't need to write notes as well. Like it's
true.
Some of the people they pass on or pass the CCNA. Here's my notes there, and it's like 400 pages. It's like
you might as well read a book.
Yeah, you basically just edit it a little bit and put it on the
book.
shelf.
Yeah, exactly. True. That's one thing I will say is either like making a book or making videos. Like teaching a topic is really good for making sure you understand it, because if you really try to formulate it in a way that is going to be easy for someone else to understand, that really helps solidify it in your mind and just make sure that
Discord is really handy because you can in a relatively it's a safe environment, but you can explain the topic there, and it's not like it's going to be a disaster if you get it wrong or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, like we all make video content and to various degrees, and Kevin tries to, but we like when you distill your thoughts there, like I find that I'll put like that's like 80% of what I put into a video ends up on the cutting room floor. It's like, okay, let's get this refined. And when you do a Discord a lot, it's kind of the same kind of thing there, where like I know how to explain the CCNA topics without thinking about it, where if you ask me some random other topic that no one's asked me in 10 years, like maybe I'll double check that for answer.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question: boson versus Pearson view practice test. Which one is more similar to the real CCNA exam? Yeah, we covered boson. Pearson. What do you think of their practice tests?
Garbage.
Garbage. Yeah.
Garbage.
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I've seen.
The joke I usually make about Pearson is a great practice test if you want to find out if you're going to fail. Because if you fail the Pearson, the chances of you passing the real deal are, let's call it, not high. But if you pass the Pearson, it really doesn't tell you much. Something like the boson exams, where there's a lot more depth to the questions, that's going to be a lot better of an indicator for you.
And just make it more clear, like the value of Boston is not necessarily the question itself. It's more like the detailed explanations, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, good stuff. We kind of touched on this. Someone says there's a lot of doom and gloom in the job market. How do you think it will shape out for IT/networking? So, with AI and everything coming, like, do you think...
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at earlier in my beginning of a rant, where it's like, there's doom and gloom in the IT industry all along. Like, first it was cloud that's going to kill our jobs, and now it's AI.
Yeah.
It was automation, and it's I mean, people always say because IT moves really quick. It's more of like a slow moving treadmill, if you're being honest. Like, just because AI exists there doesn't mean that the shop you're going to be working at is going to be fully adopting it, kind of thing. There, like, it's there's companies there that are using like switches older than Kelvin, which
that's not difficult, Don. If you want proof that IT is a slow moving walk, just look at Google's statistics for IPv6 adoption. IPv6 has been a thing. Yeah, IPv6 has been a thing for what, 2024? It's been a thing since the late
97, I want to say.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. It's been a thing for over 20 years, and Google's numbers, the last time I looked, because I actually looked for a conversation, was about 50%.
Yep.
So, it's not a sprint.
Yeah, definitely.
It's more of a IPv6, for example. There's a government, U.S. government mandate for
OMB,
I think 2027 or 28. I can't remember which, but 29. One of those years is it's like, oh, everyone should be IPv6. Like, sure. It's gonna be one of those things where everyone's waiting until like the last minute, and then everyone's gonna be scrambling.
Think DoD is the one resisting, because then they can't. If they switch to V6, they can't squat on V4 blocks anymore.
Yep.
Okay. Got a question, I guess, for me. Is CCNA valued and well paid in Japan? Yeah, it's definitely valued. Well paid is, I don't know, kind of subjective. I'd say in general, Japan does not pay IT staff as well as like the States. So just keep that in mind if you're...
How's cost of living over there, though?
Cost of living, I'd say, is probably lower than the States. That's just my guess. I've never lived in the States, but, there's a lot of cheap housing, cheap apartments to rent. Food's not that expensive, so... Yeah, maybe it balances out.
Toronto be relatively similar to California, I'd say.
Toronto?
Yeah, that's where you were, like Toronto, right?
Yeah. Before Japan, yeah. All right. Here's a good question. You mentioned that network engineer is kind of like a vague job title. So someone asks, what's the difference between a network administrator and network engineer?
So usually administrator means it's kind of a shorthand for IT generalist. It's usually smaller shops that kind of have like the IT guy more than like an IT team. So usually it's kind of codifies that you're like a team of like one or two people, usually a smaller shop, usually smaller budgets. Whereas an engineer kind of implies a more mature organization with ideally team and process and more budget.
I will say that keep the fact that Don used the word usually about 50 times in that sentence in mind. Because the other thing to consider is that companies are not always particularly, let's say, consistent when it comes to using job titles. And so I've seen network admin roles that are, CCNP collab level roles, and I've seen network engineer roles that take a net plus.
There's no perfect.
It just look at the job responsibilities, keeping in mind what Don said about the fact that job descriptions can be very inclusive of a lot of topics that aren't necessarily deal breakers. But to really determine the scope of the role, you have to look at the job description more so than the job title.
Yeah, right.
As a generality, engineer, engineer is higher than administrator in the pecking order there.
Yeah.
Like usually, I mean, there it is again. But like CCNP or is usually like the network engineer kind of level. administrator is usually like the CCNA to CCNP kind of level. But it's really nebulous, and jobs will sometimes just call people engineers just so they sound more important and stuff. It really depends on the organization and how they consider things.
Usually, right?
Usually.
All right, another question about cybersecurity, but I think I'd like to ask this sort of in general. It says, if I want to get into cybersecurity, should I get a computer science degree? So what do you think about like getting a degree to get into a specific field of IT? Is it necessary? Is it good to have? What do you think?
In the West, I got to preface this.
Right.
In the West, I'm not saying it.
Usually.
But in the West, we don't. I'm just gonna say it. It's impossible. Usually, you don't need any degrees to get any IT jobs. The exception tends to be if you are doing software development and you want a traditional programming role. They don't usually like certs, or at least they haven't adopted it yet a lot. That's kind of the distinction. There are some engineering kind of things there where in Canada you aren't a real engineer unless you do like your PE engine stuff, but no one really cares. They lost that fight like 20 years ago.
I will say that there are a couple of exceptions. I can name public sector as one. Any organization where, to be clear, public sector doesn't do everything right. But any organization where that tends to be very traditional and in checking off marks is going to like seeing a degree. But that's not every org. In terms of a CS degree specifically, I'd say get it if you want to fulfill the check mark, and obviously if money allows for it, if time allows for it. But don't expect that the topics that you're covering from a technical perspective in a CS degree are going to transfer cleanly to an IT career field. It's just not going to. CS is very theory oriented. It's very, hey, what's the architecture of a computer like? And we generally just don't care, right? We generally don't care about the specifics of a CPU, of how a CPU works. It's just we as a generality, if you're working on something like a network or if you're working in systems, you're looking at a level higher than raw architecture. Now, if you're a microprocessor architect, you work at Intel, for example. That's where that changes. But as far as going,
there are some niche things here and there where like when you get deep into networking, like chipsets matter and those kind of things. But a CS degree is never going to hurt you. It's not like I'm going to tear up your resume if I see it. Personally, I don't really care about a candidate's education. I've been burned too many times, so I only really focus on education or certifications and experience. And I generally don't even look at their education section.
I'll also add that because it comes up a lot, especially in the Discords there, the value, I tend to align with someone else on Discord named Duck, position there where the value of a degree is not necessarily in the credential itself or in the technical courses. It's in the things outside of technology, the technical writing stuff, the business side of things. Understanding that stuff, that's where a degree can help, and forming a network that a degree can help with that. As Don mentioned, there's job fairs at college.
Sure, when I did college, I still have friends from when I did that. And actually, I just got accepted to college's program advisory committee for developing new degrees and whatnot there. So I gotta be positive.
What's that meme? You're not supposed to be part of the problem.
Hopefully, we're making it better.
All right, move on to another question, or this is more of a comment.
Sure.
With 100, I guess that's rupees, 100 rupees tip. Thank you from Bhavya. He says, I'm CCNP security certified, so congrats, that's a tough cert. He says, I'm having difficulty learning AnyConnect VPN. I have knowledge about other types of VPN. I'm working with TAC VPN team in India. So not really a question there. AnyConnect, do you guys have much experience with AnyConnect?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I wrote 2 books on firepower, but... But
so wait, the question is
not really a question
there. Just saying I'm having difficulty learning AnyConnect VPN. I don't know if you have any specific advice. Like,
I mean, learn
Paul
site to
Lamley
site first.
has books on CCNP security, but
yeah.
it's as far as VPN clients go, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if that's what you want to hear, but like
I mean, if you're talking about the secure client deployment itself, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If you're talking about remote access VPN as a generality, I'd say learn site to site first. That tends to be the easier of the two, because at that point you're not talking about, well, hey, I have a client, I have an endpoint that needs to connect, and now I have to worry about posturing with ICE and all of that and all of the integrations that can come into that. Now you're just talking about, well, I've got 2 routers or 2 firewalls and I'm running IPsec between them. So learn site to site first, and then use that as your foundation once you learn IPsec and TLS and all to jump into remote access.
Yeah.
And I'd say either of our training companies like CBT Nuggets or INE would cover that in spades. Any kind of CCNP security video.
Yep, good stuff. So check them out, CBT Nuggets or INE, or both, if your employer is willing to pay for it.
And of course, Todd Lemley also has his own training at
right.
I'd be remiss to not mention before he texts me.
All right, we got another tip, $5 from Mega Samson. Thank you. He says, I've been getting 30 to 40% on practice tests. My test is in a month. What would be the best way to improve scores within a month? Okay, so 30 to 40 is pretty low, I'd say. Like, you've got a lot to learn. You guys have any specific
It
advice?
depends on why you're getting those questions wrong. If you're getting, so you at that point you need to just push the big halt button on taking more practice tests, and then go back and look at the questions that you missed. And really, honestly, this is where, again, that maturity that Don mentioned comes in. Really assess yourself on why you missed them. Did you miss them because you misinterpreted the question? Well, at that point, it's just an exercise in reading more carefully and really getting to the heart of what the question's asking you, and not overcomplicating it. There's a bunch of test taking tips in there. But if you're missing it because you don't understand the topic, well, now that's a different issue. Right. That's
right.
the bigger issue that we need to solve there. And in that case, go through the explanations that Boson gives you, go through your training material, figure out what your training material is. Like, are you just using a single source, or how good is that source? And then what else can you incorporate in? Just really honestly assess yourself on why it is that you're missing those questions. And if it's a concept lack of understanding.
Yeah. Like if it's not a case of like, I hate subnetting, questions and I'm just gonna randomly guess them again until I get to the next thing, or it's not like something like that. I'd say that that's a fundamental learning block failure. Like that's not like oh, I don't know SPF as tightly as I could. That's like I'm getting a third of the possible exam score kind of thing, right? So I would you'd want to do an honest assessment, like see where you're actually at. I look very heavily at what your source is. So if you're, let's just say you're reading I'll pick up my book. If you read my book and it's not working, then maybe you need to pick up Jeremy's book instead. And
or Odin's book.
There we go. Or vice versa, or the official stuff. Or if you're watching, I don't know, Neil's course, and maybe you should check out Jeremy's instead. Or you need to change something there into the mix. If you identify the issue is not necessarily you, then maybe it's you need a different approach to the material. Yeah. Maybe you aren't labbing things there, like maybe you never bother doing like packet tracer or something like that, you're not like but yeah, you need that's low enough there. You got to hit the stop button, like you said, and just kind of say like, why are we here?
Yep. And I'd say again, get on the Discord server and ask for help others. That's helped a lot of people, I think, get ready for the exam. Is just
and even if you're too shy to participate, sometimes just watching the conversations is useful. For sure.
Absolutely. But also don't be shy. I mean, it's not like we're going to say you're worthless just because you get something wrong. Realistically speaking, all of us are just there trying to help, and so it's one of those things where don't be shy. Participate, and you'll get out of it what you put in.
I talk to Calvin almost every day, so I'm used to talking to people who don't get things.
And speaking of Discord, we got a tip from Gio on Discord.
Just wanted to mention something real quick. Jeremy, if you I just want to mention something. Because I saw it in Chaz. It was flowing by. I actually forgot this when I mentioned public sector. I just wanted to correct myself. I think Bindeer, it was a couple months ago. I saw a OMB publication. They're shifting away from requiring degrees in the public sector. So, sorry, just wanted to correct that.
Okay. Yep. Good. So I got 2 super chats from Gio, who is on the Discord. So thank you, Gio. First one just said, "Love you guys." Second,
Who's that guy?
Who's that guy? We know Gio. We got a what do you say? Channel named after him. So the second one, he has a question. Says, thinking about going for NP security and cloud certs, Azure and AWS. What should I go for? And then he says, I already know the answer at this point. Just want to give money. So thank you. You have any additional comments like NP security or cloud certs?
You're getting Jeremy ever closer to his Porsche there, Gil.
Yeah, we can't end the stream.
I mean, we already
Porsche.
know what path he's going, but just I guess for everyone else, I mean, if you're going to do generally the path for like a professional sort of like CCNP is, you would do like the router and switch or an enterprise these days as like the baseline. Yeah. And then after that, you would branch out into whatever makes sense to you. Like if you work with phones, you do collaboration. If you work with security stuff, you do security. If for most part, that's the most recommended path there. Like if you work for like you're only working on firewalls, and that's like your job, then there's an argument that okay, maybe I'll skip the enterprise side and go straight to security. But it's unless you have a really good reason, you should stay on the path there, because there's a lot of implied topics and gaps there where like CCP security is not going to teach you about OSPF. It's just going to assume you know it when you get to the firewall configuration.
Yeah, I will add a caveat there along those same lines. That even if you do choose to skip it, and there's plenty of good reasons to skip it, maybe you don't want to spend the $700 on getting a credential you won't necessarily find value out of. That's fine. Just make sure you know the material.
Just to be clear, you don't necessarily have to get the cert, but you should have the knowledge. And
because the general rule of thumb there is that every other track kind of centers around enterprise, because at the end of the day, if you're not routing traffic, if you're not switching traffic, you're not getting traffic up to your firewall. You can. There are ways you can connect an endpoint directly to a firewall, but generally speaking, you're not doing that. So you got that traffic has to get to a firewall somehow.
Yep. Sounds good. All right. Another question. While Jeremy's CCNP video course is still in progress, do you have any recommendations for a completed video course for CCNP? Well, you guys, I think you guys can show your...
right?
I mean, mind who you're asking. You got a CBT Nugget trainer here and an INE trainer over there.
So I think I can predict the recommendations. Kelvin recommends CBT Nuggets, and Don recommends INE. I think there's the answer there. Yeah. So, my CCNP course is going along slowly. After I make the next few CCNA videos, I will get back to it. It's still going to take a while.
I will say that either way you go, generally speaking, you're not trolling. You're not shooting yourself in the foot unnecessarily. No matter which of the two directions you go. There are some courses I won't mention that I feel like you'd be trolling if you're using those alone. But actually, on that point, if you're studying for a CCNP, you're never doing one resource, and if you are, you're failing yourself, quite frankly. Just use the CCNP is the time where you use as many resources as you possibly can. Just soak up everything you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, use what I have from my course as one resource, but you're going to have to read documentation, look at other video courses, maybe get the books, things like that. Like, you really have to branch out. CCNA, you can sort of more expect the instructor to give you more of a complete solution, like one book, one video course. That's going to be enough for you. But at the CCNP level, you typically have to.
Even the CCNA is 2 books now for pretty much every provider.
Yeah, true.
But the old adage is like, buy a CCNA book, read the CCNA book, pass the exam. That falls apart pretty much right after the CCNA for across the board. So, and especially when you go multi-vendor, you'll find that Cisco is actually a lot kinder to you than you might think, compared to like, say, other vendors out there where, by the way, they're not even going to mention that certain topics are in the exam. Just good luck with that, or all that fun stuff.
Yeah. All right, I'm scrolling through. I see a few comments on Neticat, and they seem to agree with you guys that it's not great. It's back from our discussion a while back. Okay, here's another question. Okay, we just asked about CCNP material. How about CCNA? What is the best place right now to buy the most accurate and updated CCNA study material? Or will old material still suffice for
it depends if you mean right now or if you mean in a month from now.
Yeah. You mean the answer is going to change in about a month?
Yeah.
I do want to, along those lines, I do want to show a little bit for ACM there, and O'Reilly specifically. If you are looking for good written material, CCNA and beyond, O'Reilly is an amazing freaking resource because ACM gives you a discount level of access. Even if you were to go straight for paying for O'Reilly, or a lot of orgs will give you O'Reilly as part of PD there. But O'Reilly, if you can find, I think you can find Jeremy's book on there, right?
Yep, my book's on there.
Yeah.
My video course is on there.
I don't know
All
if
the
yours
books
is
are on there.
done on O'Reilly.
So they just added the previous version not that long ago. I will say, because I spent a lot of time looking at it when I was reading the new book there, I think they put in the a wrong version because there's I noticed some very glaring editing mistakes that don't exist in my book. So I think they might have uploaded the wrong file.
Fair.
But
Okay.
no matter, they're gonna update that soon.
Either way, that sounds like at some point then all three of the major CCNA books are going to be on there. So it's a great resource.
But
And
yeah,
those
I do like
books too.
O'Reilly. I can share that I'm actually Disney's top, or one of the top O'Reilly users. Disney
Nice,
track.
Yep. O'Reilly's great.
It takes a lot of time to relearn when IP address is done.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. O'Reilly is great. I did a live session like a couple months back for O'Reilly, and as part of that, I got lifetime access, so I'm using that plenty.
You lucky duck.
Yep, it is great.
You want to hand that over, buddy?
And my practice exams, which I sell on my site, they're going to be on O'Reilly soon enough also, or sometime next year. So
Oh, cool.
if
So
you have
saying
O'Reilly,
next time O'Reilly reaches out to me, I should take them more seriously.
yeah. Anyways, okay, next question. It's directed at me, but I'll ask it to you guys also. Have you met any other instructors in person, like Kevin Wallace or CBT? I guess CBT means like CBT Nuggets instructors.
Oh yeah, I know most of the training industry, and they know me.
Yeah, Kelvin. I mean, you are a CBT Nuggets instructor.
I know a decent amount. I met. I think I know the CBT Nuggets guys.
Yeah.
I've met them in person, but
Nice.
I can't think of anyone else I've met in person, mainly because I haven't been to Cisco Live, so I'm sure that's going to change next year. But yeah, I know a decent amount of them.
Are they sending janitors? Are they doing that well?
Yeah. As for me, I haven't, but next year I'm planning to go to Cisco Live, so hopefully meet these guys and other instructors in person.
Hey, Jeremy, that bowling bet's still on, right?
Yeah, I'm down for bowling, but I got to practice. It's been a while, but
Well,
yeah.
my wife dragged me bowling last week or so, so I'm nice and practiced.
All right, make it a three-way competition. We're taking bets. Who's going to win our bowling competition? Me, Donald, or Kelvin? All right. Next one. We got a couple questions like, how's the future of networking looking as cloud is overtaking the scene? We already sort of covered that. Like, there's a lot of doom and gloom.
Highlight
There's
that
networking
right there.
in
Like
cloud.
cloud is
Yeah.
not a shorthand for no networking. There's tons of networking
Yeah.
in cloud. There's tons of networking and AI, especially if you're doing local systems. Like all the stuff, like you still need to know subnetting if you're working on cloud. You still need to understand all of these topics. Like, it's not going away just because the actual node is in the cloud.
I will also add that you probably need to know more networking, and I only say that because the majority of orgs today, the way that they're deploying cloud is hybrid. So they've got on-prem stuff, they've got cloud stuff, and that means you need VPNs. And so, in a situation where you otherwise might not have needed,
or data center interconnects, but those are even more.
but then you're just venturing further into complexity. So
Yeah. Okay, another good question here. Would you consider DevNet Associate more important than CCNA these days? So what are your thoughts on that?
No, because the DevNet Associate is a very advanced. It says Associate, it's really not. You should be at least CCNP, around CCNP level for ideally multiple tracks before you do DevNet Associate. And so it's kind of the best and worst of both worlds, where you have to understand your automation, but you also need to understand tons of Cisco equipment from Meraki to ACI to
CCM and
firewalls,
ICE and
call manager. Like you basically have to work on the majority of the Cisco domains to have a real shot at it.
Yeah.
And the DevNet professional level, like Kelvin's still crying about that.
The DevCore exam? Yeah. No, that exam was, hey, do you want to read 60 lines of code for one question? Great. Do you want to do that 100 times over?
Pretty much, yeah.
No, yeah. I will say that more important as far as getting into networking, hell no. The CCNA by far more valuable for that, only because it's kind of along the same lines as security. With automation, you got to understand what you're automating. You have to understand the infrastructure you're automating, but also alongside what Don said there about, hey, you need to know CCM and ICE and all of these Cisco solutions.
Plus, they're testing in the middle there. They just don't want somebody who knows Python to instantly get the DevNet there.
Exactly.
You need to understand the Cisco side of the equation.
And I would also say you need a prerequisite of knowing Python before you start the DevNet Associate. But I'll end by saying that the common joke I make there is that every DevNet cert is one level above what Cisco says it is. The DevAsk is an entry level exam. The Dev Pro is a CCIE level exam, and the Dev Expert is hell. As Don can probably confirm.
I can.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. I definitely agree, at least on the DevNet Associate being a professional level. Like, I wouldn't take that before CCNA for sure. And I'd probably wait until I have CCNP Enterprise before going for it even. But
yeah, like ideally you should have exposure there because let's just face it, a lot of the Cisco there is part of its a lot of its acquisitions and different BUs there. So it's not like there's a nice uniform way that every REST API looks exactly like this. It's a big family, but it's not a happy family.
I will say that thank goodness that the people who riff on Cisco for being very vendor specific haven't found the DevNet Associate yet, because the second they do and they see all the Cisco solutions in there, they're gonna have a field day.
Yeah, but no, you can't have the Azure P. That'd be.
All right. Another question. He says, "What are your thoughts on Microsoft certs, and how would a CCNA and MD 102 cert look on a resume?"
I mean, I'm an Azure solutions expert and DevNet expert. Not DevNet, I got that.
Wishful thinking, buddy.
Azure DevOps expert. So, like, I've maintained a lot of the Microsoft expert certifications for quite a while now. If you work with Microsoft and you work with Azure, then yes, it makes sense. If you do not, then don't.
I gotta go for Azure expert one of these days. But in any case, the MD 102 specifically, I feel that if your role is not just pure networking, but you also have a good mix of Intune and Microsoft 365 in there, but it's more of a generalist role.
The
CCNA and MD 102
365 ones, right?
It's MD 102 is like the old MCSA Windows stuff, I think.
Oh, is that the hybrid ones?
Yeah. It's wait, no, I think that's pure M365. I think MD 102 is, if I recall correctly. But in any case, I think it's the desktop support stuff. But in any case, if your role is more generalist, that combination and the knowledge it gives you is kick-ass. It's really
what I generally recommend as like a career plan kind of thing. There's like learn your CCNA, and then as you're working, you should start learning your Windows and your Linux like kind of separately, because the more you understand about the system side, the better. Because one, you can lab easier if you can make your own domain controller and work with like a Linux server, and two, when you're interacting with other teams, especially if you're a pure network role, you can, and they say like, I can't join a domain, then you have a better idea what that means, or what Office 365, well, I guess Microsoft 365 now, or like you have a better idea like the different components and how it how they actually consume the network, and makes life easier for everyone.
Yeah, I think a very common theme that people don't necessarily tend to pick up when they first start out is that it's not just the network that's important. At the end of the day, the network is a service that things consume, right? And so especially as you get higher up, if you're working on things like, let's take SD-WAN, for example, right? And you're doing things like cloud on-ramp, or you're doing application-aware routing. Well, now you have to understand, especially if you're doing AAR, right? Generally speaking, if you're doing AAR, you're routing out to external services, to SaaS services, right? So understanding how M365 works is great if you're trying to understand AAR. I'll also add that at a certain point, when you get higher, especially when you get higher up, it is completely inexcusable for a network person to not understand Active Directory, as an example. That's just, it becomes an implied expectation at that point.
Yeah, like people aren't really going to test to say, like, do you know Outlook? Do you know Word? And at a certain point, people are just going to assume you know the basics, like Windows and Linux and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. Next question. Someone says, which firewall has a higher market demand and is more beneficial to learn? Cisco Firepower or Palo Alto? This
like most things, it depends.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think Palo technically has the higher market share, but
I actually saw Gartner from Cisco the other day that Cisco is coming back on.
Yeah, they're climbing up again. Yeah,
they're climbing up again.
Nice.
Saying that, like, my advice with firewalls is pretty much the same as cloud. Wait till you're working with a vendor or a company and use the vendor that your company cares about.
Yeah.
Because if you learn Palo Alto, you might understand the majority of how Cisco does things, but it's different enough there that you should just focus on what matters to you.
Yeah.
And if you learn, like, say, Checkpoint, for example, then it's like, that's great, but if you don't, the people don't use Checkpoint, they might not care.
Yeah, firewalls are like cloud in the sense that, yes, there are transferable concepts, but the way that Palo does something, it's a lot more proprietary. The way that Palo does, for example, App ID is going to be pretty different than how Cisco does it, even though the concept of identifying applications is transferable between the two. How the firewalls do it, that's proprietary.
Yeah, fair enough. How about if someone, like, they don't have a position where they're managing firewalls yet, but they want to study them? Like, would you recommend one over the other?
I mean, I would still. I mean, are you saying a scenario where they don't encounter firewalls at all and they just want to learn one?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
probably Palo, I'd say.
My only caveat is Palo Alto and Fortinet and like those kind of vendors are not necessarily junior friendly in the sense that. Like Palo Alto, like Cisco, if you have the rights to download it, you can download it and set up a lab. No one cares. Palo Alto, you need the licensing for it to do the thing.
Yeah.
And for the same. And a lot of these vendors are, the further you move away from Cisco, the harder it is to, as a junior, to get into them.
Granted, I will say that there are a couple ways around that, especially
there's caveats. Like Fortinet gives you like one free license.
You can talk, especially if your org has a relationship with them, you can talk to your AM and get NFR licenses and that kind of deal.
I mean, there are ways. It's just the further you move away from the Cisco ecosystem, the harder it is. Now, saying that, you can't just say I'm going to download the Cisco Secure Firewall. Like, you need entitlements, so you need some of a level of relationship for there too, but. And you can't play with like cloud or whatnot to like spin up a firewall if you want to pay money. I would just say like it's usually not a huge benefit to understand a firewall as a junior. It's more kind of thing I would expect you to learn as you get experience, because it's the level you're going to learn a firewall as a junior is probably different than someone who's like trying to learn like a CCP security.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Looks like I lost some of the old chat.
Oh no!
Gosh darn it, Jeremy.
Let me switch to live.
I'm trying really hard not to fill the swear jar here.
All right, that's fine. We got a question. Thoughts on NOC analysts? Do you have any thoughts on NOC analysts? Is that a good job to go for? Is that like, I assume that's sort of
that's usually like the dream job for like a network junior. If they can get it, usually at an ISP or something like that.
Because it gives you really good exposure to maybe not not necessarily the the depths of the network, but it gives you really good exposure to operational networks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually good. I mean, it pays pretty well for an entry level job. It's flexible, so you can do it with school, and there's no real downside to being a network analyst. It's usually better than having to go through like tech support or help desk if you can avoid it. But it is more situational. You know, are you a full CCNA, and are you lucky enough to get in there?
I will say that those roles tend to be pretty competitive when they pop up. So that's one area where
it is harder to get. Like,
you got to be really solid on the CCNA topics, for example.
Yeah, it's a great foot in the door if you can get it. But yeah, it is kind of competitive.
When you asked that question, Jeremy, I thought you were going to go in the direction of what do you think of NOC analysts, the people? And I'm like, I don't know, they seem like very good people.
Good people in general. All right. Has anyone tried the CCST cert? Have either of you taken the exams?
Yes, I've taken all of them except for the desktop one because I'm not writing a book on it yet. Basically, I'll write an exam for pretty much any book I write.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But they are fine.
Fine.
They're good for what they are, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we talked about earlier with Calvin and whatnot, it's perhaps a little bit lighter than the CompTIA stuff. And is it too light? I found it's pretty close to what it should be, at least when I wrote it. It's I mean, it's not going to change your life or anything like that. And it's below the CCNA, so the job market itself probably wouldn't care in most cases, but there are cases where it's probably useful.
I will say that it's a nice stepping stone. We say that the CCNA doesn't take, you can go into the CCNA with zero IT background, and for the most part, that's true. But if for some reason you're still feeling nervous, go for the CCST.
It's a confidence builder. That's probably the way I put it.
Yeah. It's a confidence builder. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice little step. It's what the CCNA used to be.
Right. Yeah, I know CCNA is great for entry level, but it is a big cert. Like, there's a lot to learn, and if it's your first time hearing about any of these topics, like, it can be overwhelming. So yeah, it's a good, as you said, confidence builder for sure, just to get a success. Get one success and then move on to the next one. All right, we got another question.
They do have back buttons. It's the only Cisco exam that have it.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Because it's not View, it's Certiport, right?
Yeah, I believe it's Certiport. It's one of those.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, in most, or basically all Cisco certification exams, if you answer a question, you can't go back. So,
which is a double-edged sword, because it sounds bad, and it to a certain person it is bad, but it also means that you avoid falling into the trap of going back to a question you're not sure about and then wasting time in doing that. Yeah, kind of forces you to look forward.
Yeah, cool. All right, another question. I can't see it now, but I remember it from before. Is labbing necessary?
I would say yes.
Agreed. Yes.
No, if you're not trying to pass.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we can assume he's trying to pass the exam. So yes, do your labs.
But even if you don't want to do the exam, like
right.
There's a certain point where labbing just becomes expected. Like if it, juniors always ask me like all the time, should I just talk about my home lab? It's like, yeah, I mean, you can mention like interviews and stuff like that, but for the most part, I'm just assuming you're labbing something. And as you get more and more senior, I'm assuming that you are, you have some kind of home lab and you're doing things on your own. It's just expected at a certain point. So the sooner you get into that mentality, the better.
Yep. Agreed. 100%. All right. Here's a good question about interviews. How would you respond to a question in an interview that had nothing to do with the position? For example, a networking role asking you how to fix a storage issue. Like, how would you answer a question that you don't know the answer to?
I mean, I was just going to say, you can honestly extend that.
I mean, most questions that Kelvin answers, he doesn't know the answer to.
I mean, I was going to say the same thing, not as Don, obviously, because saying the same thing as Don is just walking into a trap there. But same thing as Jeremy, which is this extends to any question where you don't know the answer to it, because quite frankly, even if it isn't relevant to the position in your view, that's not a good approach to look at the question as saying, well, I don't have the answer to this because it's not related to networking or whatever case may be. The way that I would approach that is just focus on what you would do in that scenario, and what you should be doing in that scenario is saying, well, hey, I don't know the answer is right now, but I'm going to do research and focus on your learning at that point.
Yeah, I guess I have a little bit of a different read on what the question is. So if the question is more like, do you not know it, then sure, that's one thing there. If the question is more like, okay, they asked me something completely outside of the position and am I in the right kind of interview, then I will just kind of remind people that interviews are a two-way street there. Like you can have conversations with, say, like, you know, you can say like, is there much storage in the job, or like you can't clarify these kind of things, just clarify them. But if it is like just throw you out there, like just to see what happens if I hit you with something unexpected, like and I do that in interviews, so like I'll find something on your resume just to catch you off guard or something like that, or and it's you want to usually kind of explain that, or I'd get some clarity around the question. Then I would want to, usually it's a good idea to say something like, I'm not sure, but, and then give like a guess that's you know, reasonable. I mean, you want to you don't have to score the goal necessarily, but you do want to make sure you don't like hit the puck out of the stadium and kill someone. Like you want to make sure that your guess isn't crazy. Like, but
if they ask you who's the funny person, you say Don. That's just an immediate exit out of the interview there.
Ooh.
Yeah,
but,
I think that's
the point is that you want to make sure that you're you just want to say like, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert, blah blah blah. Or,
so to give an educated guess based on what you
know. Just make it clear it's an educated guess, because one, you're engaged with the question, and two, you're kind of showing the humbleness of there's a. So that's probably the best way there. If it is like the first read I had there, where it's like, oh, where did this topic come from? Then
clarify,
clarifying, because if they just say, oh, didn't you know this is a storage engineer job? That might be grounds to say like, okay, let's stop the interview for a minute and figure out what we're doing here.
Right.
Realistically speaking, a combination of what we said is probably the best way to go about it. Educated guess, but then add in that you're going to that in that scenario you go further and clarify and do research, etc. etc.
And tell them like how you would go about learning that. Yeah. Just specify that, like, you know how to figure out things that you don't know. Okay. Another question: in networking or cybersecurity, which programming language or languages are preferred, and up to which level do you need to know them?
So again, just so we like, cybersecurity is like more of a journey. It's not like a job, like a 5-year plan usually. Generally speaking, Python's the industry darling for networking type roles and others. If you're more advanced, Go has certain benefits, but for the most part, Python's the main language in the industry.
I mean, it always ultimately depends on what you're working on. In any given, I mean, Juniper, for example, has Python, Ruby. They've got a terrible little language called Slacks on some of their Unbox stuff, which Donald is cringing right now because he did the. You were looking at the JNCIE. Oh yeah, the JNCIE has it.
It does.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of different languages, and ultimately, I will add that beyond that, a lot of what you're working with is not. I should just grab a sheet of paper and write JNCIE on it. There we go. I will add that a lot of what you're working with is not going to be a raw programming language. It's going to be what we call a DSL, a domain-specific language, where something like a HashiCorp has HCL, right? For the Terraform. Ansible obviously has their own way of writing playbooks and such. So you're not very often you're not going to be working with raw programming languages. You're going to be working with abstractions from that give you an easier time.
Right.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're doing there. Like if you're developing like an automation framework or something, that's one thing. But if you're asking like, hey, I'm a junior, what programming language are, again, just like firewalls and cloud, like, you know, wait until you have actually something to automate. Because what I find people do is they'll say like, I'm going to learn Python, and then they realize like, you know, Python's really not that hard, and then they kind of forget about it because like, you know, they learned how to do a variable in a for loop and then didn't touch it again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the value in learning Python is learning the base language as a framework and then learning the libraries. The libraries is where all the value is. If you can't use libraries, realistically speaking, you're not going to be very useful in Python.
Right, for sure. Okay, going to another question, sort of about the nature of the CCNP. He says, is the CCNP just a deeper dive into the CCNA concepts, or is it like a continuation, like covering new concepts, new topics?
I'd say it's a continuation because what Kelvin and I usually say is Cisco exams assume that you have 100% mastered the level below whatever you're taking.
Right.
So if you take the CCNA, it is, and then do a CCNP exam, it assumes you aced it, like you know every little thing about it. So like subnetting never comes up again after the CCNA in a Cisco exam.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean they won't say like, oh, by the way, why is this OSP up here not working? And then you, it's up to you to realize that the subnet mask is incorrect for the interface. Or so it's not going to say, oh, by the way, in your CCIE lab, what's subnets and hosts. It's going to say like, here's the thing, do the thing, and you have to react to it. So there's a lot of applied learning. And where a lot of people fall down on the CCNP is they assume that whatever's in the official study guides is the entirety of the CCNP. It's like, no, they assume that you're a network professional and you can figure out where things are. So if they don't cover what's a topic and salt, like salts in the Encore. Like if you read the official course, they cover salt in like a page or two, and then it's like but that doesn't mean they can't say like, oh, by the way, here's a lab on salt, or like it's up to you to fill the gap.
I will say that the NP expects you. The NA, you can have your hand held. The NP is like, okay, you're training to become a network professional. It's time for you to let go of the hand and be a more independent learner. That's generally how the CCNP mentality goes. I will say I had a little bit of a different read on that question, and if my read is correct, the answer is both. The way that I read it, is it more of a just the topics in choosing a CCNA just deeper or new topics? And it's both. It's both a vertical expansion because you're taking the topics that you already learning CCNA, OSPF, and you're expanding on it. It's both flat and a horizontal expansion because now you're getting new topics that you're studying at the same level of depth. So EIGRP and BGP and SD-WAN, SDA, and all of that fun stuff. So it's both in that sense. It's a very big exam.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of introducing new topics while going deeper in the ones you've already studied in the CCNA for sure. Definitely. Okay, another question. Is it worth having a website with personal tech projects on it and having that on my resume? I have no IT experience, just got CCNA. What do you think? Like having a blog or something like that?
A blog, yes.
A blog is different.
Blogs are good because one, you can practice like explaining things and that kind of thing. And sometimes you have your own kooky projects that are interesting to read and whatnot. Kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? That would be like a portfolio in software. So would I be offended if I saw a job application or a resume and said like, oh, by the way, click calvintran.com and it had more stuff in it? Probably not. Whether or not I'm willing to click it depends on how much I care, which would really depend on what I'm hiring for. Like if it's a junior, I might, if I already like selected the resume, like you made the short list, I might look a little bit deeper, but I'm probably not like the ATS, for example, is not going to find that link, right? So you want to make sure that your resume has like your, all your keywords and matches and those kind of things.
Yeah.
I will say that it won't hurt. I'll put one caveat in there. If you're gonna put a website on your resume, make sure it works. I'm sure.
Yeah. Make sure it works, and they're you want to be there, or you don't want to have like a bunch of ads that maybe have some unfortunate ad loads when I click it. Like you want to make sure whatever you're presenting is clean. And
you want to make sure that you don't make yourself seem like this tacky person that's unorganized. You don't want, in other words, you don't want to make yourself seem like Don. But yeah, I mean, like you said, if you're gonna put something on there and it works and it doesn't make you look bad, it's pretty non-offensive. Especially if it's something like a blog where, hey, it's just another way to show that you know the topics that you know.
Yeah, like absolutely include a blog in your resume.
If you have one,
cover letter or that kind of thing.
Yeah, even if it doesn't serve your resume, like I think it's good to just have like build your online presence. You know, in the future.
Yeah, it builds a bit of a following in theory. It also will help just refine ideas, and it just kind of shows a bit more personality because
it reinforces soft skills, right? It shows that you know a blog, for example, will show that you know how to write.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, go for it. I'd say definitely, especially a blog, something like that. You could just write about what you're studying in the CCNA, even like explain what a VLAN is, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a very broad question. I'm curious how you guys interpret it. What does it take to be an expert? What do you think?
Well, I don't know why they're asking Kelvin that.
We have one certified expert here. What does it take?
I mean, like a lot of things there. It's a lot of motivation, dedication, fortitude, I guess is a word. Like basically all the positive things there where you have to be willing to like give up a lot of weekends and late nights and these kind of stuff there. Like tell the wife, sorry, honey, I'll buy you a steak after kind of thing. Like it's so you gotta get in the right mentality. Doing something like like I did 2 GNCI, or I passed 2 GNCIEs and failed my third one, which I'm going to circle back and do eventually. I did a Kelvin level thing where I screwed up at the very end, but anyway, long story short, it's a journey. Like it's the more you do at the expert level, the easier it gets. Like I was probably more. First time I did like GNCIE, I was more about a nervous wreck than. Now I kind of roll out of bed and it's like, okay, let's do it kind of thing. Whereas it's but you need to study, you need to make sure you're there. When you're doing expert level, you need to make sure that like forget multiple sources. Sometimes there are no sources. Like sometimes you're literally like reading
poking and prodding at the platform.
Sometimes you're just labbing things yourself there because you find out the Cisco documentation is wrong or the you're getting in arguments in all the communities like our Cisco study group or those kind of things where it's like you got to get really into it there. It's got to be your thing.
Yeah.
At least until after the exam.
Yeah, it's got to be like the main focus of your life for that period, at least. You know.
Yeah, I'll look at this from a different perspective because Don took the perspective of how do you become, procedurally speaking, how do you become an expert, and all of that's correct. I'll take this from a technical perspective, context, and what I mean by that is, in the CCNA, you learn a lot of these technologies in isolation, right? You learn OSPF and you learn subnetting and you learn these as separate topics. And in CCNP, you start to kind of gradually blend them together. Like, hey, here's redistribution. Here's how you take multiple routing protocols and blend them together and design. And the expert level expects you to have a really good grasp of everything that's going on your network. So not just your routing protocols, but what can impact your routing protocols, right? For example, unidirectional links, right? You need to understand how, fiber sometimes gets snapped and how that can impact the rest of your network and how that impacts convergence and all of that. So ultimately, you need to understand not only the parts of the system, but the entire system as a whole and how everything ends up feeding into it.
Yep, great answers for sure. I wish I could give an answer, but I'm still far from being a true expert. So, get back to me in a couple of years. We'll see.
You're going at the speed if you're a CCNP course there.
Unfortunately, yes. I have nothing else to say. No comment. All right. Next question from Julio Maya. Thank you. He's a channel member for 6 months. He says, got my CCNA 2 months ago. Congrats on that. I have 7 months of experience as a network analyst in an ISP. Great. You got some... you got your foot in the field.
Cool.
He says, got only one interview since and no opportunities. Any advice? So I guess he wants to progress forward, but he's having trouble finding the next step, getting the next opportunity.
No, it's kind of same kind of variation we're talking about. Like, get yourself out there, people networking, all the kind of stuff there. Feel free to build out your LinkedIn, start connecting to people. Like, you can always add me on LinkedIn. You can add Kelvin if you're really desperate. Yeah, I'm sure Jeremy would accept you too if you had or ask. But just start growing that there, because aside from making the number bigger, it does actually have some benefits. Because as might imagine, a lot of people are on my LinkedIn, so I have a very wide network, and Jeremy has a very wide network there. And as you get added to those networks there, then perhaps you start hearing about saying like, hey, we need a network engineer for this, or
for sure.
And if you join Discords, just to repeat what we're saying here, is like if you're interacting with us all the time there, like there's been times where I'm looking for a particular person at one of my ventures, and I'll say like, well, I know this guy knows Palo Alto really well, or whatever I'm looking for, so maybe I'll ask him, see if he's interested in applying, or so it can lead to opportunities if you're connecting with people.
I mean, I'll point to Todd in your Discord, Jeremy, as an example of that kind of go-getter-ness, where you make yourself noticed, then good things will come your way. I will say my response to that would be, because it's not particularly clear in the question, it depends on whether you're still that ISP or not. Are you looking for jobs and you currently have a job, or do you not currently have that? Because if you're currently at that ISP, one of the answers is look for vertical movement up in that ISP. Look for internal roles, because generally speaking, and I say generally, internal roles tend to be a little bit easier to move to, just because you have that report with.
I will say that I have a lot of experience in the ISP world, and at least in Canada, they're marred in politics and all kinds of fantastic hiring decisions. So a lot of times it is easier to leave the ISP and then you can come back and, if that's what you still want to do. So sometimes ISPs at least in Canada have a lot of nepotism and all that kind of stuff, and it can be easier to try and jump around them rather than with the proper turn. Plus there's a lot of competition, right? So like if you're in tech support or a NOC and you want to be a network specialist or something, then everyone else in the NOC is probably applying for that job.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, but it doesn't hurt, just look for the positions anyways. You can look vertically.
Look for any.
Like always, throw your resume out there.
Look for whatever you can.
Try and make friends where appropriate. Also, like we talked about adding us on LinkedIn, that's fine, but like also try and get a bunch of recruiters in your network there, because they literally make money off of shilling you, right? So
yeah, true. Okay, yep, good stuff. Oh, he says I'm not anymore looking for jobs, so I guess he's not in the position anymore at the moment. Okay, so internal position is not an option, but
well, same kind of principle for everything else.
Yeah. So definitely the personal networking, I'd say, is
don't let that get you down. Just I mean, I realize easier said than done, but keep your head up.
Yeah.
I'll also add, because you have some requisite experience already there, like if you did feel it was beneficial to start working towards like a CCNP or whatever kind of more professional level, it's acceptable. If as long as I look at your resume and it makes sense why you got that certification, then it's usually fine to do.
And as long as, like we've said before, you can defend it.
So if you're doing a job search and you have sort of spare time because you don't have a regular job, you could use that time towards studying for the CCNP or something like that. Definitely. Cool. All right. Another question. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Why did they take EIGRP out of the CCNA exam?
We kind of touched on it, at least jokingly.
Yeah.
But my read on it is that Cisco is kind of scared of bad press, and they kind of listen to the haters a little bit too much. So a lot of the haters were saying, "Oh, it's a Cisco exam; it's not relevant anymore because X, Y, Z." So they kind of tried to make the CCNA more vendor agnostic, and the consequence is they killed like EIGRP, even though it actually is like the easier to learn protocol and actually make more sense in like a CCNA level context. But they were scared. I feel like they were scared, or that people would be like, "Well, it's the we need OSPF because otherwise we don't care about the exam." And they probably said that, well, on this unified CCNA, we don't want 2 running protocols because that's too much. And
yeah, that I mean, I don't take such a I'll call it pessimistic read, not in a bad way, but my read on the whole EIGRP thing is Cisco's just looking at this, like you said, Don, and going, well, this is a unified CCNA. It's not just a route switch anymore, and so if we had 2 protocols in there, that'd be a pretty big exam. So let's just keep one, and if we're gonna have one routing protocol, I mean, realistically speaking, going back to what we talked about, if the CCNA trying to be the transferable cert, the one where you can get it and not be completely screwed if you have to hop on an MX router or something. It's one of those things where OSPF is the more transferable protocol by far, even if EIGRP does absolutely have technical advantages. Mainly in the fact that the design for EIGRP tends to be a lot more flexible because you're not forced into this hub spoke style kind of hierarchy of the backbone area.
Yeah, it's because you got to remember, or maybe people don't know, but like the earlier versions of the CCNA, they had specializations for the CCNA level, so they had like CCNA, CCNA voice collaboration, and if you wanted to be a collaboration specialist, what you would do is you would do the CCNA voice, and then you would then do the CCNP going on your way, right? What they've kind of tried to do with the unification is they tried to make it so that you're still kind of expected to do your CCNA if you're a collaboration person. You can arguably ignore it because it's not required, but most people would take the CCNA and then they would do the higher level learn. That's kind of their intention. So yeah, it's kind of a consequence of the cutting block. I thought I would have put money down that they were officially going to add it.
I want it back.
Version 1.2, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it's going to come. Like,
as long as they don't throw in that godforsaken BGP topic they had from the old CCNA, I'm good with that.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Another question. I'll answer this one. It says, about how many hours would you recommend dedicating to completing the video, lab, and flashcards for each day of your CCNA course?
Sounds like it's early. You.
Yeah. So my CCNA course is divided into days, but I'm trying to slowly move away from that terminology because, exact 1 day of study varies, like, and how much material you can cover in a day. Yeah. So don't think that because it's called day 1, you have to cover this in 1 day. So however much time you have to study each day, just, study the material, don't rush it, and go as far as you go. Like, don't feel pressured. I have to cover all this in a single day.
It's along the same lines of what we talked about earlier about how long it'll take to complete the CCNA overall. Just unless, again, there's someone breathing down your back saying you will be fired if you don't finish this in a week. Don't worry about the time so much, just mastering the material. Do what you have to do to understand everything.
Yeah.
I'll also just add in, there's a typo on it that a lot of people get hung up, especially when they're juniors, about do I study for like 4 hours a day, or do I study for 5 hours a day, or whatever number? And I generally like to tell people to like try and focus on learning like one thing a day.
Yeah.
Or it could be completing one unit of things. So like that could be completing a chapter, or that could be learning a concept, or like try and limit yourself so it's not just wrote like I must learn 5 hours a day, because the number of people who can learn 5 hours a day is very honestly learn for 5 hours a day is very few.
Right.
Like you're probably browsing YouTube or playing with the cat or whatever you're going to do. Like it's or if you are doing it there, you're absorbing like 20% of it. So like focus on a thing, like if your video's on, I don't know, static routes, and watch static route, lab it a bit, make sure you understand like different ways of doing it, and call it a day after that. Like, don't say like, okay, well, Jeremy says I have to learn do whatever day 47 is, so I'm going to do that on day 47. Like you can break it apart a little bit, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Try and make it more bite-sized. Like, you don't need to master everything in one go, and you don't need to do these long sessions. Like, it's more efficient to learn one thing. It's better for your recall and helps you internalize it better. That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice. Okay, scrolled up a bit to find an older question. This is from Gio again. He says, I have an INE and CBT sub right now. Good on you.
Cool.
He's thinking about trying out the Cisco Learning Cisco Learning Store, whatever they call it, for S-Core, Security Core exam. Should I use it? They have a sale going on right now. So we already covered our opinions on that.
I have read a lot of those courses because I have the Cisco UL Access Pass. Yeah. So
I think we're gonna go back to a phrase that we've used repeatedly: non-offensive. I think
inoffensive is how I would describe a lot of those courses. It'd probably be a lot more offensive if you're paying your real money for it.
Yeah. The value proposition is honestly the shittiest part of. There goes the storage jar. It's honestly the worst part of the of those offerings. But
however, they do come with lab environments and those kind of things.
Yeah.
There is some value, and if you don't have a good framework, whatnot, like S-Core in particular, like. It's one of the more niche books there, so I couldn't tell you what the actual quality of the official study guide is, but usually the CCP level and CCIE level official study guides are vanishing amounts of quality.
Yeah. Okay, another good question. Do you guys know where I can do SD Access practicals? I'm currently using GNS3 for practicals, and I want to know if it's possible to do it there.
So, go for it.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, the first is Cisco's has their CCIE practice labs. Those are rack rentals, essentially. They have SDA in there. The only caveat is you need an encore, active encore exam within the last 3 years. So the renewals don't count. You have to actually take the encore exam. Okay. Yeah. The second option is a rack rental from someone else. I know Kawar Butt, Kbits has a good SDA rack rental.
Dojo also has one. It's
for wireless,
but it is SDA.
Yeah, because SDA has the wireless component too, so you can use that. The biggest challenge, honestly, is getting your hands on DNAC. And running it. The switches are not a big deal, especially because the Cat 9Ks in CML support being on board in the SDA. It's funny, before 2.7, I think, when they first came out, they had this really frustrating bug where the serial numbers would not change between deployment to the Cat 9K.
Yeah, they fixed that.
They fixed that. But the initial problem was that because DNAC tracks, or Catalyst Center tracks your switches by serial number, you can onboard more than one, but that's been fixed. So ultimately, if you can get your hands on Catalyst Center, and you can now, because assuming you have entitlement, there's a virtual version that you can run either in AWS or on your own ESXi host, although fair warning, it takes up 256 gigs of freaking RAM.
I run into my... larger labs, but you need
takes a fair bit. But if you can run it and you have access to CML, it's pretty easy to get access to practical SDA stuff nowadays.
You can also run it in the cloud, but fair warning, that's a lot of resources, and you'll get quite a bill if you're.
And also, you need to, at that point, you also need to configure your VPN into your VPN. If you're running
you also need
VPC,
infrastructure to actually run the labs and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So it is a little tougher than labbing basic routing and switching in CML or whatever, but there are those options, just a little bit.
Also, just to throw it out there, GNS3 is my least favorite of the labbing solution. So if you love it, fine, but I would encourage you to use Eve, CML, or my new favorite is Container Lab. But GNS3 I find is the least reliable and feature.
It used to be like the most popular, I think, but these days, more CML, EVE-NG for sure. Definitely. Okay, another question. We got a super chat. Thank you from Delfino757. He says, would you recommend taking the CCNA Boson exams in sections based on your playlist? I'll answer this one. No, I don't recommend that. I recommend saving the Boson XIMs until you've done all of your studying, like you've studied all of the topics, and then use the XIM for a final review before the exam. Because if you do those questions as you're studying, By the time you get ready to take the real CCNA exam, you'll already know the boson questions, and they won't be able to accurately evaluate your level because you'll already know them and their answers. So
I'll just throw it. I'll go for it.
I was saying I will disagree with that a little bit.
Sure.
In the sense that if you are the point about burning practice exam questions, very real. If you do them once, you've pretty much burned the surprise value of them. At that point, you're just remembering the answers. So that point is very real. But if you're not planning to use a practice exam as an end of study validation tool, but rather as a checkpoint in a sense, which I've done before with certain exams that were big and I didn't want to do all of them all at the end, that's a valid strategy, I'd say.
Yeah, true. That is true.
Yeah,
it depends on how you want to use it.
I'm more in the middle there. Like, generally speaking, I feel like you shouldn't do a practice exam more than like 3 or 4 times. Just for the fact that eventually you will learn, start memorizing the answers, intentionally or not, and you might start learning that it's just because that's the right answer more than it's because that's what OSPF's admitted distance is or whatever the question is.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you could do, I guess, is take the exam, but don't look at the correct answers or explanations. Just look at your final score. So it could, I guess,
It
maybe.
depends. Like, I'm very, I have a very, anemic kind of memory where it's like, if I kind of see like even like the color changes green or something like that. But if you're saying like you just pass through and you just don't know what the answer is,
Boson does have a mode like that.
Probably.
Because Boson, with Boson you can just pass through it and take a score.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to do that to just measure your level, you could, but I don't think there's much point in doing that.
I feel like that might, for me personally, that might start forming bad habits there. Like if I always pick B for an answer and I don't correct it, I might just reflexively pick B.
Yeah.
That could be more of a me thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's more of a you thing.
Here's one. I think we did cover it in some way, but he says, why do some people say CCNA is a waste of time? So there is this one YouTube short. This guy is saying CCNA is a waste of time in whatever current year, 2022 or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah, I fight with, or not fight, that's a strong word. I have had a few public disagreements with those kind of people. And it's, for one, you got to always remember the perspective of the person, right? So if this is a sysadmin channel or whatnot saying CCNA sucks, and they're looking at it from perspective like, well, I rolled out I was doing IT and I'm immediately a cloud engineer. Like, I don't need to know CCNA. That's one perspective. Two, if it's like I'll just pick on Network Chuck because he's good friends with Kelvin and I, is if he's like, Mr. Cybersecurity is saying like, oh, we're donating to the CCNA. Well, obviously his audience is more focused on cybersecurity, so he'd be more pushing people that way. Though he is trying to work on a CCNA course. It'll be, I think, done after your CCNP course.
After a CCIE course.
But anyway, long story short, it depends on who the person is. It could also just be, I'm trying to think of a kind of word than CompTIA shills, but people feel like for whatever reason, CompTIA is the way to go there, and CompTIA is kind of trying to wedge themselves as like they're the entry level and anything else is more advanced, and that's usually not true.
Yeah. I mean, it really boils down for me to it's the internet. People say shit. Like
your jar is gonna be full.
I have stopped trying at this point. People say stuff on the internet. People have all kinds of different perspectives. At the end of the day, like Don said, just consider the source, and ultimately just make your own informed decision based on the job market, based on what you're seeing in job postings, and go from there.
Yep, good stuff. All right. We've been going for 2.5 hours. Maybe take a couple more questions and then wrap it up. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
sounds good.
I'm good for a little while longer. It's up to you guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's one. What's the average salary for CCNA in America? So, you occasionally see people say
very complicated questions with a lot of variables. Generally speaking, I would say network analyst type role. is usually in the 50 to 60,000 range before overtime or whatnot. That's usually pretty common. In certain areas, you could probably see that as low as 40,000 if you're talking like a really low cost of living kind of place, like I'll say like a Utah, those kind of places. Maybe not Utah itself, but
and if you're in Cali, you're basically homeless if it's not 100K. So
like I've said, there's also the opposite spectrum there, where if you push shopping carts at in LA, you probably make like more than all of us combined. But like so it's a hard thing there, but usually I find 50 to 60,000 is a reasonable target, with 40 being the low end.
Yeah, sounds about right. But just look in your area, Google research, that kind of thing.
But again, there's a ton of caveats there. There's
a
lot of, like, you cannot count all the caveats there.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Here's one. Do you think I can speed run and learn CCNA in a month or two and pass the exam? Yes, you can, but I don't recommend it. And we kind of already talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of questions, well, can I? It's like anything's possible.
Yeah, you can, but should you?
But is it likely? 1 month is ambitious. I mean, my 2 new CCNA books, I don't know the page count there, but it's probably
in the thousands.
In the thousands, or at least 1,000 pages, and between the 2 books. And Jeremy, I don't know if you know your page count off the top of the head, but it's probably
1,200 total. Yeah.
You say a couple hundred?
1,200.
Okay. Well, that is a short book. But anyway, like 1,200 is probably about the average for the books. And like you got, was it 50 days of free CCNA or 60 or
63? Yeah.
63. So you're talking like even like a Jeremy's course there, and take it on face value, you're talking about doing like 2 of his day videos a day.
Yeah, that's a lot to cover, definitely.
So if you're at a spot there where you already have the prerequisite knowledge and like you know the feel, sure. I mean, anything's possible. I mean, it depends on who you are. Like if I write a Cisco exam, I'm probably just YOLOing it for the most part. I'm not I'm not sitting down studying unless like I have a very particular goal in mind or anything. So, but if anyone asks about any question like below 5 months, then it's usually like you're going against the average. So,
but I mean, it ultimately, I will say it depends on you. Like if you're a full-time student and that's, you're in college or something and you can afford to dedicate, all of your weekends and a bunch of hours on each day, a month, 2, not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, there are different variables too. Like if you're a student and and you have like a CCNA class, you can focus on it, or perhaps you're unemployed, so getting a CCNA is your job. Like there's different motivators and stressors.
Yeah. But like we said, and ultimately this is always gonna be what this comes down to. Just make sure you have enough time to take care of yourself. That's very important. Make sure you have enough time to take care of your family. Make sure you have time to read the material, to absorb it, to lab it, to practice it, and you're good to go. It really doesn't. How long that takes is going to be dependent on you.
Yeah. Yep. Basically, same thoughts here. All right. Take a couple more. Here's another question. Can I use your books and your videos to pass the CCNA exam? Yes, you can.
You can also make a book for books.
Yeah, so yes, you can, but there are plenty of other materials out there. My general recommendation is to use one set of books. It could be my books. It could be Don's book with Todd Lamley. It could be Wendell Odom's books. Use those. Use a video course. Use practice exams, and then I think you're set. Do you guys generally agree with that?
At least 2 sources, whatever combination that is.
Yeah, 2 resources and practice exams is usually what I recommend. I think that's a good start. So,
that's fair.
Yeah, so it could be, one of those could be mine, both of them, or you might want to get different perspectives. So, use my video course, someone else's book, or my book, someone else's video course, something like that. Some combination, and I think you'll be set. Cool.
Cool.
Holy shit, the actual packet thrower, awesome. There's one comment there.
Okay, you lost your swear jar too.
I think we're late enough in the stream that YouTube doesn't care anymore.
Awesome.
I'll still
That's
try to be
an
nice
interesting
there.
word
I
to
am
use.
representing the mouse.
Okay. Got a few new ones coming through. Hello, Jeremy. Do you recommend waiting for your new videos before taking the exam? I want to wait, but I already have studied for 3 months. You can, or you can sort of get ready for your CCNP studies by learning how to find materials sort of on your own, like Google, YouTube search. For example, Kevin Wallace released a video about the CCNA AI topics. You could use that to learn the AI topics. Yeah, so you don't necessarily have to wait for my videos. You can
Or,
check out other
my books will
resources.
be out in a month or so.
Yeah, there you go. Check out.
So I will say that as someone who's taken the new CCNA, the way the question pools work and update they're the longer you go, the more the new topics will become relevant. So
right. So at the moment,
I don't
they're
want to
not
say
really...
like, oh, the new topics aren't really hit on right now because they could change tomorrow or they could change there. But while the pools get updated over the next little while, that's kind of where the more you wait, the more you're going to get hit with the new stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, maybe we'll do one more. Let's see. What project can I do after completing studying CCNA to add to my resume? So do you guys recommend doing like projects, like networking projects to add to your resume? Is that a thing?
So we kind of touched on it earlier with like the home lab stuff, but like for juniors, I don't necessarily care to read about projects in a resume. However, you can bring it up in like interviews, whatnot, or where it's relevant. But like my problem with home labs and what a lot of people have with home labs is that it's kind of a lot on faith there. So like let's just say like Calvin and I both have Active Directory domains in our house there for various reasons, and like if you could say that, okay, I have an Active Directory domain, that's cool, but we'd have to take on faith that A, the domain's working properly and not a horror show. B, you didn't just YouTube it or get someone at Discord to build it for you or whatever, or and like see like is that maintained, like what's the state of this, is this running like a virtual box on your desktop, like what do we talk about here? So there's it's great to in theory say like, yes, there's a home lab, whatnot there, and like I said, it's kind of expected. And you can pepper it in like I learned about this in my home lab there, so here's how I'd answer this DNS question or something like that.
Right.
I wouldn't say like unless like you come up with a really cool idea, like, oh hey Donald, I needed wireless in my garage there, so I bought some bridge or made a wireless mesh to make sure that I could get wireless. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. But like there's a very few like here's a network project, at least that a junior would do that I would really care.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is that, firstly, the thing about a lab, and I mean, in a lab, you're not necessarily following production network practices, and this is something that Don kind of touched on with it being with the horror show comment. But I mean, sometimes that's unintentional. Like you just quite frankly have a bad lab. Sometimes it's intentional because you're not going to build your lab the same way that you would build a production environment. Like for example, in my lab, I just stick everyone in enterprise admin because I don't want to bother with permissions.
Sometimes it's intentional because you're purposely trying to break something.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. So the way that you build a lab is usually, and there's that word again, usually not the way you build production. The other thing is, as far as projects go, if you're trying to get exposure, that's where volunteering can come in really handy. Work on something out there, where especially even if it's just support, even if it's just your local, the church, for example, or local community center, anywhere where you can get your foot in and do anything, that's good exposure. That's stuff that you can include on your resume to, at least if nothing else, show that you're engaged.
Yep. Yeah, sounds good. Good advice for sure. Before we wrap up, I have one more question that I remember from before. I can't find it now, but someone was asking what you think of virtual lab solutions like CML, GNS3, EVNG versus a physical lab. Do you recommend someone set up a physical lab?
Oh, this is actually a fun conversation.
Yeah.
I think Kelvin and I have similar kind of things, so let's kind of start this off. So personally, when you're first starting out, there is some value in actually working with physical gear, at least a little bit, like actually using console cable, actually having to cable things. Figuring out that your lab failed because the cable was loose because the connector broke. Those kind of things like that. There is value there. However, that diminishes very quickly. So when you're working with like the stuff that like Kelvin and I do, we would basically only do virtual where possible, and there's some things where physical labs are important, like I have a Juniper access point here, and like wireless is not something that virtualizes, so we need to get that going there, and Kelvin's going to grab something, I know it. Or like phones or PoE, like these kind of things, like you need physical labs for, but the majority virtual lab is we're pretty close to parity these days for a lot of the things.
I was gonna go try to grab my phone to show it off, but I can't get the Ethernet cable out. It's one of those stupid boots that cover the latch.
I do have a phone behind me, but it's not plugged in. Oh, I do have a CC. Yep, there we go. There's a book, CCST.
There you go.
There you go.
I missed the last parts of Don's comments, but I'm going to assume that
you probably know what I said.
Yeah, if I'm going to assume that, I agree. What I will add is that in some situations, physical is the only thing you can use, right? Wireless collaboration to an extent. I mean, soft phones do exist, but there are things that you can only lab by having physical phones. So wireless collab to an extent, kind of security. I mean, if you think about some firewalls, I guess. Okay, anyway, there are things that physical labs are used for, but generally speaking, virtual labs are just a lot more flexible, right? Like you're not waiting around a week for FedEx to kick around to play kickball with your box before you can finally get your hands on a router. And at the end of the day, OSPF is OSPF, and the joy of plugging in physical cables kind of goes away really quickly. And,
plus recabling your lab every time you want to do topology becomes old really fast. And what usually happens, and this is kind of related, but one of the reasons Kelvin and I say don't use like your home network as your actual lab is one is you're going to aggravate your significant other or family, whoever's there, break Netflix, and two is once you get it working there, you're probably not going to want to have to recable it all the time there to make it work, whatnot there. So your lab just kind of becomes like a very boring kind of environment where you're just kind of thing there. So having a proper physical or virtual lab is, I think more flexible unless you need it for something.
Yeah. I see the question in chat about, do you feel like you have to have an in-house network to understand the material? I kind of feel like we just stumbled onto that question by accident. But yeah, no, I do not, like Don said, I don't recommend labbing on your home network for all those reasons. And on top of that, I mean, it's your home network. How complex are you going to get? There's a ceiling, and generally speaking,
there's literally a ceiling in your house.
But what I recommend is just keep your home network as simple as possible. When I got 3 CCNPs on a network, on my home network at that point was an AT&T box connected to a Cisco switch. I kid you not. So you definitely keep your lab separate. That way, if nothing else, if Don's comments about aggravating your significant other, maybe you like getting in fights with your significant other, I don't know, right? But even if those comments didn't phase you, just the fact that you can lab so much more in a dedicated lab environment, that should be enough.
Yeah, like just to find a point on it there, like if you're doing something more advanced than like CCNA stuff, like let's just say on a spine leaf architecture, if you want to do something like a EVPN, which is a fancy way of managing that kind of thing, then it's like you don't want to be like, oh, I need another leaf switch, or oh, I need more fiber because I can't connect or like a,
Yep.
whereas virtual, you just, okay, I'll drag and drop or whatever I do, and off you go, and wait 5 minutes for the thing to boot. And
yeah.
I mean, funnily enough, I'm in the middle of a sticking NSX in my lab right now. So,
my condolences.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I generally agree for sure. Like, I think at the entry level, like when you're just getting started, it is nice to sort of get hands-on with real devices. Like even if you just buy like 1 or 2 used switches or routers, and
It's
you can
really
sort
like
of,
20 bucks on eBay these days. It's not.
yeah. And you get like an idea for the physical side of things, like physical links going up and down as you connect and disconnect cables, things like that. Because in like CML, you disconnect a cable, it doesn't detect that the devices aren't connected anymore, so the interface stays up. So you might not even realize that you disconnect a cable and the interface goes down. So
one final point I will make: some things are easier to lab virtually than others. I'm talking specifically about switches versus routers. Switches are very, and it's just an architecture thing. Routers generally these days, especially if you're talking about like ISRs, those guys are software switching. So you're doing the switching on just the general purpose x86 CPU, and that means that the routing functionality is basically identical on an ISR 4K to it would have been the CSR, but now it's the C8 KV. So whereas with a switch, even the virtual switches in CML, they're emulating the ASICs because it's ASIC-based forwarding, and so there's missing features in some of the virtual switching platforms. So if you want to get a physical switch, go for it. I have a bunch. I'd say physical routers, unless you're just getting one, like Don and Jeremy said, unless you're just getting one to mess around with the cabling and stuff. Physical routers, generally speaking, waste of time.
Yeah, and it's like by the time you're doing a useful physical lab, you usually talk like 4 there, 3 switches, and at least 3 routers if you want to do proper routing. Like it's that adds up quickly, and then you talk about a rack, and depending on where you live, they might be too loud, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we got one more. I'll ask it.
Sure.
Which practice test would be best for CCNA, Boson or Alpha Prep? I don't know if you guys have ever looked at Alpha Prep at all. Do you know about it?
It's not a community. You join the Discord and they banned you or something.
That's Alpha. Different.
Okay.
Different. Yeah, Alpha Prep.
Trying to get me there, right? I have heard of Alpha Prep passingly, but I've never taken much of a look at it.
I'm comfortable to say I stick with my Boston recommendation.
Yeah,
I would defer to what we said
Boson.
earlier. Best in the industry.
From what I've heard of Alpha Prep, I would say Boson is probably the better solution for sure. Okay, so we're almost at 3 hours, guys. I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time.
Before we do, I did find a good comment in the chat that
of course,
we have to share. A lot of motivation, dedication, things Kelvin doesn't have. Donald.
That's a quote for the ages. There you go. All right, so before we wrap this up, where can guys connect with you, find you? Donald, which platforms are you on?
Oh, I'm everywhere, man.
Unfortunately.
Mostly your Discord is usually there.
I'll put that in the comments.
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel that I've been neglecting for I think 1.5 years now, so I should probably make a video eventually. I do occasionally make content for INE. I am a business partner with Todd Lamley, so I do a lot of his training engagements, or at least help on the back end. I'm also on a number of podcasts. I'm doing Cisco Champions again next week.
Oh, are you? Fun.
Cool.
Talk about cybersecurity stuff, so people should like that. I'm everywhere. If you need me, just shout my name. I'll come.
Nice. Yep. So I just put the Discord link in the chat. So if you want to connect with Donald, there you go. He's the packet thrower on basically every platform. So Kelvin, how about you? Where can people find you?
You can find me on CBT Nuggets, obviously, LinkedIn, your Discord, and a bunch of others. I have a blog, Blame the Network, that I actually just I've been neglecting my channel too, my YouTube channel. But I just put a blog post up there about a CCI level EIGRP thing that someone brought up in the Cisco study group, which is funnily enough why you should also join Discord, because you get to see interesting conversations like that one. But I've got a blog and.
Okay, good. Thanks. And if you're watching this, you already know where to find me, this channel. I'll be on my Discord sometimes, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. So, okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for the questions. I hope the answers were very helpful. See you next time. Bye.